All right, guys, we're back with another episode of the Vet, the Bet, the Casual. Good to see you, Siraj, and all you guys as well. Before we start, make sure you smash that like button, hit that subscribe button. Bell button is below. All that information is there. Instagram, Twitter. Go give us a follow. Now let's dive right into it. We're going to be previewing UFC Vegas 19 today. UFC Fight Night headlined by Curtis Blaydes and the Black Beast, Derrick Lewis. Oh, look at this man, ready to roll. Sick shirt on, man.
Came off the wall, obviously. The back, hopefully.
Yeah, we got a nice little story with that one. Got to see the man live for my man Siraj's bachelor party here in Vegas. That was a real treat.
I think I definitely enjoyed that fight more than anybody else, right? As if my boys got a W over Francis Ngannou. Take it, take it. Move on.
I mean, some of us enjoyed that as well, as you encouraged us to sprinkle on the Black Beast there. So even given the fact it was an underwhelming fight, we did come out on top there. So
big dog.
No complaints.
That should be
led to a nice night at One Oaks. So that was a great night for sure.
Hashtag if you know, you know.
So we got UFC 258 coming up this weekend, headlined by Kamaru Usman and Gilbert Burns. That's going to be great. And today we're going to be touching on UFC Vegas 19. Anything you wanted to touch on before we dive right into it?
Yeah, so if you haven't checked out our preview for UFC 258, it's happening tomorrow. So, if it's not out by then, obviously that's not out. But in any case, I feel like we have a lot of stuff coming out right now. We've got a few highlights of several fighters out, and it's going to be a really fun time. I think we've been able to really get our wits about us when it comes to these cards. And yeah, I'm pretty excited for diving right into it here.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like you said, man, we got a bunch of exciting stuff coming up on YouTube. Make sure you stay tuned and lock in for that. And let's dive right into it. So, kicking us off is a featherweight bout. Literally feel like this was added to the card like 30 minutes ago. So, the asterisks we'll have on this card is that, there are 15 fights scheduled. It's constantly moving. Right now there's only 4 fights scheduled in the main card, and I'm sure there's going to be some boosting up into there. So, with our order, take it with a grain of salt, as this just keeps changing. So, first off, we got a featherweight bout. We got Rafael Alves versus Pat Sabatini. Dope name right there too. So, couple nice prospects here. Rafael sports a 19-9 record. He's going to be making his UFC debut on Saturday. He did win 5 in a row, including his Dana White Contender Series finish against Alejandro Flores. Maybe you have a little bit more to touch on that one. I'm sure you watched that one.
Yeah, well, so even with the whole prospect thing, the weird thing about it now is all these guys that are basically, getting their experience in regional scenes like LFA, RFA, and those, they basically are coming into the UFC now as prospects. We were supposed to see Mike Trizano versus Alves, and I thought that was going to be a phenomenal fight to watch. We put Alves on our prospect watch list, so if you haven't checked that out, by all means, go check that out, because, we ranked him on there. Felt bad that Trizano was going to back out of that fight due to injury, but here we go. We got a new booking, and Sabatini's kind of like that guy who circles around and gets kind of the fights in big places. He was the CFFC champion, and I think just after winning both belts, he's getting a chance here. It's a good short notice fight. He won the vacant one fairly recently for the featherweight division, so I think he's riding pretty good highs. It's just you're coming into.
I was gonna say both dudes have a lot of momentum coming into this one. Alves has won 5 in a row. Sabatini has won 5 of 6, like you mentioned, in the CFFC. So, both guys are coming in with a lot of momentum, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how they scrap.
Mm-hmm. Well, the big thing with Sabatini is that loss is also because of an arm injury, right? So this guy actually injured his arm and had to, give up that L. So the guy is basically a thoroughbred when it comes to the regional scene. And I think it's for a lot of maybe diehards, especially people that, follow him are thinking about time.
Yeah, for sure. And so, both these guys are going to be making their debut next Saturday. Looking forward to this one. Like we said, man, these fights were announced half an hour ago, so there's actually no line available for it. So let's just give our best guess and see how far we are.
Well, here's the thing. Alves was primed for a big fight, and I think he can attack all levels very well. Like we said, experience on the regional scene is a big deal, but when you step into the ocean with the big sharks, it's kind of a different fight. And despite Alves kind of coming in as a newcomer as well, I just think he should have that edge. I think he'd be technically in training camp for a lot longer, despite, the action that Sabatini has seen. So I really do think you got to keep Alves as the favorite. And even if it's around a minus 160, 170, that would probably be my guess. We'll see when the line does come out. But, I think you're going to have to give Sabatini the respect of what he's accomplished on the regional scene. But at the same time, skill wise, the way he attacks, all three levels and the way he can kind of even go to the body. I really enjoyed watching him fight. So Alves really does look like kind of the guy you want to watch,
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, based on, looking at lines of his previous canceled fights and stuff like that, I was going to give Alves about a minus 200. So right in line with what you're thinking. So, stay tuned for this one. If, the lines do get released and we see something that jumps out to us, we'll be sure to post it for you guys. Perfect. And so that takes us to our next fight. We got a nice lightweight bout between Drakkar Klose and Luis Pena. And man,
I feel like this fight's gonna move up on the card because frankly, because it's so recent, it just seems like how is Drakkar Klose going to be fighting the second fight on the entire card? There's just I don't see that happening.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I'm really excited about this one. We've been wanting to watch Klose for a while. And on the other side, we got Luis Pena, who I could not think of a more accurate nickname for this man as, Violent Bob Ross is exactly what I pictured when I saw his picture. I did not see Luis Pena there. So.
Right.
We got Klose on one end coming in 11-2-1 record. He's actually been around the UFC since 2017, which is pretty nuts, man. He just doesn't fight that often, but, he did have his tough 25 finale against Mark Diakiese. And that was handing Mark his first loss as well. Since then he has gone 3-2 in the UFC. But if you look at some of those wins, man, Bobby Green, Christos Giakos, Lando Venata,
the big thing's the losses, right? Like, look at the losses. Like David Tamor, like this guy's a huge kickboxer in the UFC, and I would honestly say, if you look at his record, he's just the guy that we don't see as often. But when it comes to footwork, when it comes to landing big shots, and maybe not all the power behind it, but all that technique, like the guy can really fight. He's one of those exciting guys, and so that loss is very respectable. Then we just saw Beneil Dariush go to work for the second time against our boy.
We just saw him dominate this past Saturday.
He's been on Terminator level, so I mean that loss right there for getting hit with that overhand. I mean, it happened to a lot of people over the course of that reign. So, I mean, let's be real, that's a good fight.
Yeah, for sure. Like we said, man, those 5 bouts in the UFC have all been incredible. Maybe that's the reason why in 4 years he's taken 5 fights. But, looking forward to seeing him take on Luis Pena this upcoming weekend. And, like we said, on the flip side, we got Bob Ross. He also won his Tough 27 finale back in 2018. But, he's been in the UFC for a while since 2018 as well and has gone 3-3 in the UFC since. So he's going to be looking forward to getting back on track as well. We saw him defeat Steven Garcia via decision. We did see him lose to Kama Worthy in 2020. Maybe you want to touch on that one a little bit. I believe that was a guillotine choke.
Well, Kama's basically the guy that's just taking down a lot of these prospects. Right? We just talked about his boy, who he basically knocked out, Trevin Jones, who just kind of had a injury/win versus Justin James, who actually has long history with Drakkar Klose. That was one of the fights that he actually really wanted to get in the UFC based on their childhood history. So if you haven't looked at our interview of Justin James, he brings up a really cool story with Drakkar there. So I mean, it's just really cool to see, Pena from the tough season we talked about. That was from the card that we saw in Vegas. So a lot of the guys that we saw in Vegas are going to be fighting on this card. Trezano was supposed to fight. Same thing, right? So unfortunately, we don't get to see him. But again, I think these are the kind of guys that seem to want to take that next step. But Pena, short notice, probably kind of guy that's staying in camp as much as he can to get these kinds of calls, and it lines up with his original schedule if you think about it. So I'm really excited for this one, and I think it's going to be maybe less of a short notice fight than people think, because I think Pena is going to come in there ready to game, but Drakkar Klose is a different beast.
So question for you. I mean, I haven't seen Bob Ross fight too much, but one thing that stands out to me is a 6-inch height advantage, 5-inch reach advantage. How much do you think that's going to come into play for this one?
Yeah, so he does actually fight long as well, right? So he's going to try to pepper you with shots. Like the most power, definitely not. And I mean, even I think he's going to be a good volume guy from the distance, but like accuracy wise, he might be trying to play with them. That's where I think Drakkar Klose's athleticism comes into play a bit. Smaller fighter, sure, but I mean, think about what we could have seen from a guy like, Cody Stamann or Jimmy Rivera last week, or actually Jimmy Rivera this coming or pay-per-view and then Stamann the previous week. But they fight very similarly, right? They keep it in close. They can move really well. And I think Drakkar Klose's footwork, his ability to wrestle, all that kind of stuff is going to be able to really play into his strengths, because I think from top position, how powerful he is, you eliminate that length no matter what. And I think Pena is going to be very active from his back. I think he's going to have the ability to kind of work in some reversals and see if he can do some transitions on the ground there and get himself back to the feet. But I think he wants to avoid, staying against the fence and the clinch work. I think, if he hasn't been improving, especially from a striking perspective, that's the way to kind of, attack the legs, slow him down a little bit. Maybe this is a fight you can kind of seal in those second, third rounds if you avoid maybe his best, work from a striking perspective in the first round. A lot of quick feet, utilizing that body movement to land some power shots or even get some takedowns. I think you're going to see a very excited and a very active Drakkar Klose in the first round. But how that plays out, versus a guy like Pena, who's always game and can take some shots. I think he can take shots, but it's going to be a really, really athletic fight, and he has to be ready for that.
Yeah, for sure. And so, like we said earlier, these are 2 fights that were announced like 30 minutes before we started doing this. So, no lines available for this yet. These are the only 2 fights we don't have lines for. So, best educated guess here?
Yeah, so like I said, I think this is going to be a very minimal version of a short notice fight. I think both these guys are going to come in very ready. I do think that Drakkar Klose is going to get the edge. His losses are very, very respectable. And so, I actually do have him somewhere between that minus 250 and minus 350 range. So I will give him I will have him at a minus 280. I think that's a very comfortable line for me.
Yeah, and I gotta agree with it. I expected Klose to be a pretty decent sized favorite. So, we'll make sure we tune in for that one and lock in our final picks if the line jumps out to us. But on initial guess, we're gonna put Klose around minus 250.
I think that's fairly respectable, especially given the fact that, like we talked about footwork, athleticism, short notice, like he should deserve some edge there.
Yeah, for sure. And a dude who's just been itching to get back in there.
And Pena may be in the same boat, right? And his losses, like we said, Trezano's split decision. Like, this is such a weird little MMA web, and we talked about it once before. Remember the scheduling and how it really is kind of cool how some of these guys end up having history together because of how much, based on suspension, damage you take. If these guys are all coming back at the same time, they technically get the chance to fight, pretty much the same time.
Absolutely. And so, that takes us into our next bout. We got a middleweight bout that I know both of us have been very excited about. It has been rescheduled a few times. So, we got Nassourdine Imavov taking on Phil Hawes.
Again, another fight that's probably going to move up on the card, right?
Yeah, there's no way this stays. The fight that was scheduled, this exact one a few months ago, was second or third on the card in the main card. So we can expect this one to move around as well. So let's touch on Phil Hawes a little bit before we dive into Imavov. We love his nickname, obviously, Megatron. Shout out to you getting in that Hall of Fame as well. So, I'm sure Phil Hawes is going to be inspired there. Somebody that we actually touched on our prospect video as well, man. Really highlighted him for February. I think we had him like number 3 on the list, right? So I think we're really
and number 2 and number 1 are fighting within the next little bit. So
yeah, exactly. We're gonna see them all, and like you said, number 2's later on the card as well. So if you haven't checked out that video, go check that one out. UFC prospects for February of 2021. But yeah, so that's Phil Hawes. Both these guys sport a 9-2 record. Anything you want to touch on Phil before we move on to Imavov?
Yeah, so let's talk about just the quick things that we always touch on, right? Like he showed such good wrestling, and then I did show you behind the scenes that Julian Marquez knockout of Phil Hawes, where your reaction to my placement of the video was the reason maybe we couldn't really air it. So at the end of the day, I think that
was sick.
Yeah, and let's be real. Despite what you saw, that woke a man up. You know what I mean? Yeah, like,
For
so
sure.
I think Phil Hawes really started attacking the striking game, and you can see the improvement over the course of those Dana White Contender Series fights. He's looked scary as he comes into the UFC, but remember, I did point out the Malkoun fight, right? Like, that was a guy who was basically on the roster in the moment, on the same card as Whitaker. I believe it's one of his training partners, and he was there to just take the fight in case something happened. And so, I mean, going into that fight, let's be real, there was already a bit of an asterisk, if you will, because I don't want to take anything away from the win or anything away from Jacob Malkoun, but at the same time, like, we know that Phil Hawes has been itching for that fight his entire life. And, you know, we have a training partner stepping in as he makes way within that given period of time. You know what I mean? And so,
Yeah, for sure.
let's be real. This is a fight, and Pi said it best. Why are we anticipating it? We're watching two very real prospects. And I think the only reason we didn't rank him is because, well, you know, he wasn't part of the list that we were given. But at the same time, it's like, we saw him fight once. We know what he can do. We are so high on him because we kind of predicted that, right? Like, he really did kind of do what we said he would. And, you know, you were kind of going to do
And in 18 seconds, no less.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? So I really love the fact that Jordan Williams fight, especially, like, we saw that he was able to weather that early storm of the power shots. Jordan Williams does not stop coming forward. He was able to use some footwork, some techniques, some level changing to get out of the way and try to avoid any of those. Because, I mean, he was getting hit, bro. We both saw him getting hit for sure. And so that's where, like, with Phil Hawes, as you were going to get into Imavov right now, it's like, it's a really interesting matchup because you're kind of getting a higher fight IQ fighter, I would say, with the more experience in Phil Hawes versus the Jordan Williams fight. So it's like, in both sides, you're kind of seeing the second fight that they're in is kind of like this new level. And
the real fight, yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And like we said, it has to move up. This fight has such a good, you know, potential behind it that it should really be on the main card.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I feel like both these guys are going to be around the UFC for a little while, so it would not surprise me to see it move even into the main card for sure. You know, let's dive right into the line here. Who do you see being the favorite in this one? And you know, I'll give you a little two-part to this one since we had the original line and the current line.
Well, interestingly enough, I'm not even going to lie about this one because it almost looks like I've been cheating lately. So I actually know where that line, I can remember where that line closed before the fight fell off. And before I get into the line, I mean, I felt like you might have had some touch points on Imavov, but maybe I actually just touched on all of them for you. I'm not even sure because maybe you had
I mean, again, we've touched on this guy before.
So
you
much,
know, noted,
right?
yeah, similar record to Phil Hawes here, 9-2. You know, they both had strong UFC debuts, very similar, you know, in terms of prospect and layout here. So, you know, I think you touched on the important things in terms of athleticism, how different this fight will be for both fighters. And it's going to be a close one. Yeah.
And so, yeah, so like, let's do Pies' favorite part here. So I'm not going to lie. If you remember that line, I'm pretty sure we pounced on Imavov when he was such a massive underdog, but that line moved drastically. And if I'm not mistaken, I could have sworn that line closed at almost half that value. Like, it might have been closer to a pick'em if I'm not mistaken. And so I actually am going to still keep that similar vibe and not go so high, but I'll give Phil Hawes a bit of an edge here from a Vegas perspective and go with a -150.
All right. And so, you know, your initial inclination was right. We're still going to give you a bell on this one. There's no way you
regular bells. Let's go. A ding, a ding, a ding, a ding.
Yeah, we missed these. But you're right. You know, originally when this fight was scheduled to happen, Phil Hawes was about a -175 favorite. You know, it did close closer to a -130, -140 last time. This time it's a straight pick 'em, man. -110. Yeah. Just no favorite. And I'm not surprised, to be honest. Both these guys match up so close that it's a tough one to call.
Yeah, well, and it's funny, Pies, because I can pretty much guarantee you that on the last time around, I definitely saw something close to that -110 as it closed up, because that fight got really close to happening, right? Like, it got pretty much down to the weigh-ins, if I remember correctly. So that's where, like, I'm a little disappointed because, like, for us, we had value on that fight. Like, there was good value, but even to break it down just quickly, I think the keeping your hands up, right? That's going to be huge for Imavov. I think you're seeing a different, you know, IQ in MMA when it comes to Phil Hawes. Like, if you're very hands down trying to find your spots, I mean, footwork or not, this man is an athlete and he's learning to pick his shots, and you need to be careful in that first round.
Yeah, for sure. definitely has to get out of that first round, and
Oh man,
then
exactly.
we'll definitely get to a nice, entertaining fight. So,
Mhm.
that takes us on to the next one. We got a bantamweight bout between another, couple exciting people we've been looking forward to. This was supposed to happen a while back as well, I believe in December, but alas, COVID hit the Canadian boy in Zahabi, and so we got it, upcoming this weekend. We got Drako Rodriguez and Aiemann Zahabi, a nice boy out of Montreal here. So we're gonna have to try and remove some of that Beaver bias. Drako, another dude that highlights our February prospect videos. We're obviously looking forward to this guy. I believe he was at number 2 on this one.
Correct. And we were saying how they was so interchangeable between the two of them, Drako and Hawes. But the funny part about that is it's just their point is kind of switched around a little bit, right? Like we kind of had that based on Imavov being a tougher fight to kind of get out of. But if he does get out of that fight looking real good, it's probably a much bigger leapfrog, if you will. But we just thought, Rodriguez had a much better chance, and it really lined up for him because, we talked about Zahabi a little bit. So even in terms of like diving too much, right? Brother of famed head coach at TriStar, Faraz Zahabi, GSP's head coach, like he has a lot on riding on his shoulders, right? He has a name to live up to. Let's be real. And, he was very open about how he feels about the way he enters the Octagon, Ironically enough, a guy like GSP was so mentally tough in there. He was saying how that's his weakest point, and that's where a lot of those losses he felt were happening was he kind of felt like he had mental lapses as an MMA fighter in the Octagon. And I think that's where you kind of have to, tell yourself, is that a massive, flaw against a guy like Rodriguez, who his only loss is basically a King of the Cage title fight, I believe. I mean, a bantamweight title fight against Tony Gravely. So that's where I think, he's getting a good name to fight. But I think that's where we're going to see a good mix-up here of, what can actually happen.
Yeah, for sure. And so, like he touched on, Drako has 1 loss in his career, 7-1 record. Very nice, highly rated prospect that we're looking forward to. And Zahabi, he actually made his UFC debut back in 2017. So he actually has been around for a while. He had a decision win against Reginaldo Vieira then. And since then, he's only fought twice, both of them being losses to Ricardo Ramos on the GSP card that you had mentioned. So, GSP had a look at that firsthand. And then, Vincent Morales in decision as well. So this is going to be a tough one for our Canadian boy, but how do you see this one kind of playing out before we dive right into the lines here?
And you touched on it, right, man? Like imagine being this guy's brother and kind of, trying your best to get him to do his thing and having that happen against Ramos and then going into the Bisping fight and then just beating Bisping for that middleweight. You know what I mean? It's just like, I can't even, GSP is GSP. He gets what he gets sometimes. It's kind of crazy. But I mean, it's one of those things, right? Like you can really kind of teach someone as much as possible, but it really comes down to kind of how they take that information in, right? So the cool thing I like about Zahabi is that he's really addressed what he thinks is the main issue here. And he's got a brother who, if you've listened to Zahabi, especially on his Joe Rogan podcast episodes, like that is a man who takes the mental game of anything very seriously. Like he is all about mental toughness and understanding how to attack different levels of the brain. And even the way he processes information, it just seems very different than, the average person. So I think he's in good hands. It's just like, it's the way we kind of talked about Conor back in the day, right? Like when you're going into 4th and 5th rounds, you can train for something, but at the end of the day, when you're in that moment, there's a lot of things that happen to you mentally, physically, spiritually, if that's something that really affects you as a person, like all of that comes into play where all of a sudden, adrenaline dump, empty gas tank, or even, let's be honest, a second wind, a second wind is something.
How sharp really is your mental focus at those times, or it might be at its peak, right? Given how the fight is actually unfolding.
Exactly.
Yeah, for sure. And so, let's dive right into the lines here. I think you know who the favorite is here, so give me a number, man.
Yeah, so
let's get my boy from the Showcase Showdown.
Yeah, right. I think because we've already done this fight, we want to do it quickly. Like we did touch on a line before, and again, like it's not like I can remember it for sure, and I don't go back to notes or anything like that because we kind of know these fighters. So I am still going to stick with what I believe the original line could be. And I'm going to go with something like minus 225. I think Drako is probably going to roll with that Vegas roll.
Ooh, on a repeat fight, I normally would not give you a showcase showdown here, but this one warrants it. Let's give this guy a hand.
What happened?
Where's my
we got
boy?
It.
Where's my boy? Show me my boy. So, the reason I give this one to you is that the original line when we first previewed this fight was minus 180. Looking at it now, it is minus 220, which is right in line with your new line. Yeah. So very impressive there.
Thank you, sir. And it comes from the way we discussed it, right? Like the way, let's be real, the way you kind of take in what I'm saying and my movement and kind of make a call, it's very similar to the way I guess Vegas would process the general information too, right? Like, let's be real. I don't think we left that fight the first time it was booked being like, oh, wait, maybe we weren't so sure about Rodriguez as, a big prospect coming into the UFC. I think if anything, he earned himself a bit more points without even having to step in there yet, Whereas, like, if you were a big believer in Zahabi being able to maybe come in there and mix it up, because I think if he can get into the later rounds, and start to really show that next level of MMA, like tire the guy out, get his power punches away from him, he's going to be tricky. But, if you can keep that like gas tank and keep that like wits, throughout the whole fight, you can really pull something out. And I think that's where Vegas might not believe so much. But again, like there's levels to it, and I think he has the right people behind him to help him get there.
For sure. So, stay tuned for that one. I do believe, the lean here is on Rodriguez here, but, if anything changes, we see value on Zahabi, whatever it may be, we'll be sure to let you guys know and post it on Instagram.
I think right now might be one of our more comfortable picks. I think if you were pretty much honest with yourself, I think you would say, if nothing changed, if you had to go into this, gun to your head kind of thing, even at that line increase, I don't know if you bat an eye personally, right?
No, that would definitely be included in some parlays for me for sure. All right, and so then up next we got a featherweight bout. On one end we got Julian Juicy J Erosa, and on the other end, we got Nate the Train Landauer, someone we've kind of touched on a few times before. So before diving into these fighters, one thing that stood out to me, the quick talking point here is huge size advantage on Julian. You're 6'1" versus 5'9". 4-inch reach advantage. How much does that come into play here?
Well, like when you watch Julian fight, that's how he fights too, right? He's very long. He likes to like lean out like this. Like this is how you're going to see him fight. He almost looks like he's from a video game, He's going to throw front kicks. They're going to be nice and long. He's going to lean back. Problem is his hands go down so much. That's his problem.
Dalsim style.
Yeah. Problem is his hands are always going down.
So, that's something to definitely keep an eye on. Julian, he comes in with a 24-8 record. He made his UFC debut back in 2018, but quickly rifled off 3 losses that, maybe had him reevaluate and take another fight elsewhere. But, those 3 losses, they were against Devontae Smith, who we saw kind of beasted up this past weekend. Shout out to Justin James' eye right there. That was a serious one.
Dude's a gamer.
Oh, yeah, straight gamer, man. Just wanted to keep going.
I know.
Grant Dawson and Julio Arce as well. One thing I wanted to ask you, man, I saw in his last fight, I was looking it up, and he won by a Darce choke. Well, what the hell is that?
Yeah, so I mean, it's kind of when you wrap your head around it. When you see, like, I'm going to try to give you a moment. Do you know when you see guys roll over? So you think it's like real rear naked time, but the guy actually slides out. Like if 2 guys are facing each other like this, but their stomachs are to the ground, and you kind of see a man's hands go under a guy's bottom there like that. That's the Darce. Okay. Yeah, like we could do. Basically. Yeah, like we could look up a great little clip of that. But it's funny that you already brought that one up because that was a fight that we bet on, and obviously I could be, a little bias, but like I said, one of the best tough seasons of all time, Tough 22, Faber versus McGregor. Everyone remembers it. So just to kind of give you a quick little rundown, David Timmer, we just talked about him, right? So that was a Europe versus Americans tough. And so Julian Erosa was one of the Americans that did it. And then basically you had Tamor on as one of the Europeans on the other side. And this guy was such a good character, man. Like I fell in love with him. He had to have been from like a very personal bias. So everybody take if I throw any type of pick advice here, you know where I stand. But yeah, like he was just really fun to watch, bro. He's the kind of guy, man, like in 10 years, if I have the opportunity to go meet him in person, be like, yo, bro, I just want to thank you for what you did because if there is anyone out there that enjoyed your approach to the game, I really, really did. And, I want to thank you for that because it made your fights really enjoyable. You're a very enjoyable person to watch. And so,
For sure.
I am hoping for the best here. But again, Landor, whew, what a beast, right?
Yeah, so let's touch on Landor. We mentioned him a few times, but he has that 14-3 record, prospect that we've been very high on. He made his UFC debut back in 2020, which was, a tough bout against Herbert Burns. He did lose that one in the first round, but he did bounce back in May of last year with a unanimous decision win against Darren Elkins. These are no joke fights for your first two fights, and to hold your own the way that you did here, he has a promising future for sure.
Mm-hmm. And I think you nailed it, right? Like, the guy's just a mean striker. So what I really, really kind of am anticipating here is two guys who don't really protect themselves too much, willing to bang it out. This is my underdog pick for fight of the night. I think that you're going to see, unless one of these guys get dropped in the first round, this is a fight where both of these guys are going to deserve a bonus. And if you have to add a bonus to a card, potentially, like, these are the kind of guys you had it for. Like, I'm pretty much guaranteeing that if this fight doesn't end in the first round, there's a lot of blood spilled. There's just a lot of strikes. The one thing that Landor kind of has against him in the UFC is, funny enough, he took that knee from Herbert Burns, Gilbert Burns' brother. It was kind of, he was backing up towards the fence, and Gilbert Burns is a pretty long guy. And and he just kind of came down. Did I say Gilbert or Herbert? Herbert Burns is a pretty long guy. And so he kind of grabbed head and just kind of landed the perfect knee and landed, like, this is what I'm talking about, right? With Erosa and Landor. It's like, guys, hands up. You guys are phenomenal strikers. Like, I enjoy watching you fight, but it's why a guy like Darren Elkins can push Landor into such deep waters. Do you know what I mean? Like, you show signs of such a good stand-up fighter, like, tack the legs real well, tacks the body really well. But, man, when you go low, like, the hands got to kind of stay there, right? And so, unfortunately, like, not everybody's jumping through the air like Michael Jordan, Corey Sandhagen, but, like, things like, that's how things like that happen, right? Like, it's unfortunate, but that's my biggest worry with both these guys. It's just lucky for each of them, they both kind of do the same thing.
For sure. And, in touching on Landor a bit, we were pretty excited to see him fight Evlov. And we know all about Evlov. You can't be not protecting yourself against a guy like that. In preparation of that fight, how do you think that'll help Landor in this one?
See, the thing is that I don't know if it changes Landor that much. Outside of a win against Evlov versus a win against Erosa are two very different things. Mind you, pulling off a win against either of these fighters is a much different story as well. And so I did not see that fight really going his way, only because of the technical side of Evlov's striking, right? Like, I think if he wanted to take it to the ground, he would have been able to willingly. I really think he would have been able to have his way in that sense. And he's just proving to be so technical in his approach, both stand-up wise, and when he kind of wants to take it to the ground late and try to land some ground and pound, he did that too, right? In several fights. So he's just proving to be on a completely different level. So almost lucky Nate Landor. Like, I don't want to say that, right? But, like, this is a great fight,
especially for style of fight, though. Let alone fighter, just style of fight, right?
My point, you nailed it. Like, that's what I'm trying to get at here. It's not about levels and all that. It's like, you're gonna have a very competitive fight right now, and this is gonna be beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's dive right into the line here. Where do you see this one ending?
You know what's funny, man, is I don't even want to waste your time, because I literally tell myself, like, I love the way Landor, like, attacks low, but, Julian Erosa, when he does his footwork, when he gets his kicks in, when he does his movement, like, he can land pretty well too. So I landed on a pick'em. I literally landed on a pick'em.
Man, fuck this guy.
Where's my boy? You're lying. You're effing lying. No, you're lying. That was one of my heart.
Minus 110 each way.
Yo, that's crazy, dog. Dog, that's crazy. That one messes me up, because I took a long time on that line. And I literally told myself, like, you know what? One guy kicks really high well. One guy kicks really low well. Both guys put their hands down. Both guys are going to strike punches. Wow, Pies. I got goosebumps in my legs, and my feet are freezing again. So
Can't say the last time I remember having goosebumps on my legs. So
Yeah.
that shows you the high this guy must be on
So
right now.
let me actually kind of reverse these questions, right? So let me ask you
Yeah.
something. So you've seen the kind of lines that Evloev gets as a fighter. It doesn't matter who he's fighting, because I think if it was Landor or any of the previous fighters he was fighting, it would have been a very similar approach from Vegas. So where do you see, I'm kind of giving you all the information you need on both these guys, because I don't believe that either man is changing their approach completely outside of surprising us with some kind of takedown or surprising us with some kind of game plan that actually might shake things up a little bit. But in terms of what you should imagine based on everything these guys have done in the past, what do you think?
I mean, to be honest, I personally feel like there's a decent amount of value on Landor here. I mean, that fight that he was prepping for with Evloev was going to be a lot tougher bout. And we're talking about a nice young prospect here where on the flip side, we know what we're getting with UCJ here. You know what I mean? We've seen it before. He obviously is going to have a lot of motivation on this one coming back to the UFC, but I got to give the edge to Landor here, especially at Pickle.
Yeah, and it's weird that you said that, because I really do think that nothing's lucky, but that shot from Herbert Burns, all I think it did was set his record back. I think that he came in with good hype. I think that like I said, Pies, these are two guys where literally I think that if their defensive striking was just a bit better, the way they kind of approach the fight, it would be a little bit different. But unfortunately, the damage these mans take is just. It's just too much. It's too much.
So we might have to look at an under here as well.
But that's the thing, right? Unless
will either man get finished?
Yeah,
right?
Dude, that's what I'm saying. Woof. It's just those technical strikes that are just pop them. Julian Rosa has pot shot kick styles. He just throws up front kicks with his long little legs. Keeps him at bay for 2 minutes. There goes 2 minutes of the fight. Then for the last minute, just boom, 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 boom. It's man, you're just where did that 2 minutes come from? Everybody's bloody as shit. The mat's done. It's crazy.
For sure, so stay tuned for that one. We'll be checking out the weigh-ins and stuff.
Probably, one of my favorite fights on the card, guaranteed. This is going to be a beauty.
Exactly. Get your popcorn ready for this one. I'm excited about it for sure. And so let's dive right into what's upcoming. You know that I love the big boys flying, and there's a lot of them on this card. So this is going to be the first heavyweight fight that we touch on, but it is between a couple of nice young prospects. We got Sergey Spivak on one end. We got Jared Vanderaa on the other, who we actually touched on again on our prospect video. It seems like everybody from that video is fighting on this card.
Because they all got canceled or something and had to get pushed to this one. So let's see if they're on the March one too.
So, Vanderaa, we did actually have fairly low on the list due to some circumstances. Getting canceled fights, all that kind of stuff. But a win against Sergey Spivak would go a long way in him climbing those rankings for sure. So let's touch on Spivak for a little bit. The Polar Bear comes in with an 11-2 record. Great nickname.
I love it. It's one of my favorites.
So he comes in with an 11-2 record, but he has gone 2-2 in the UFC. We have actually touched on him a few times, but most recently, he had that decision victory against Carlos Felipe in July. Slightly underwhelming fight in that one, but he did get the decision victory there. Prior to that, he had losses against Marcin Tybura and Walt Harris, both of which, we have, high immense respect for. And, he did have a win against Tai Tuivasa. So that 2-2 record is a little deceiving, as those are all 4 quality fights. What do you think about the Polar Bear here? Well,
yeah, it's funny, right? We're seeing how good Felipe is getting at this level. He's actually really improving. We took him in the last fight, and he's starting to finish. He looks really good.
He looked great in that last one, yeah.
And so for me, it's Spivak's one of those guys where I feel like he's the guy that's letting people know that they need to get better. Tuivasa fights him, loses in the second round, I believe, by arm triangle, and then basically goes into AKA with Daniel Cormier and these guys and starts training his wrestling and his grappling, loses a bunch of weight, looks way healthier. So good thing for Spivak is he's putting himself on notice on the behind closed doors. You know what I mean? He's definitely testing the waters with a lot of good heavyweights, and so I like the chin aspect of it, but I also think that if Vanderaa, he's going to be very old school, right? I feel like if you had to call a man a heavyweight version of Sam Alvey, you're looking at him. This guy's going to try to lay a big punch on you.
That's my boy, Smiling Sam, man.
Yeah, and let's talk, who else is your boy? Hansaka? Hansaka was the last one.
Yeah. You knew we had to touch on the Hansuckers.
Yeah, so why don't you get into your boy Vanderaa and Hansucker? I mean, that was the last fight that we saw him, right?
Yeah, so, like we said, Vanderaa on that prospect video, really excited to see what he can do. The last fight that we touched on him with his 11-4 record was on that Dana White Contender Series against Henry Hansucker, where he did lay some Hansuckers in the first round and got the knockout there.
But that was an interesting fight, right? Because you could also say that we just saw how good Vandeera's chin was. To say his striking was any good would be a stretch. He was trying to land big shots, but Hansucker was actually landing the bigger shots. It's just one guy had a much bigger chin. And to be honest, your boy Hansucker looked like his sucker tank run out. Like he was just not able to throw.
Yeah, he started out fire, man.
And then just ground and pound, right? Kind of turtled up. And Vanderaa just kind of looked up at the referee. He's like, I can barely throw any more punches, so please end this quickly. and he got a big win, right? So I mean, this is going to be a true test of athleticism now. I think there's going to be a side
especially
aspect.
Given the way Spivak is looking right now, how lean he's looking, that cardio, all that kind of stuff. You better have a gas tank ready for this one.
And the big thing, right? I think if Spivak had something to get better at, it was like if you look at the way he approached those later rounds, he was definitely looking tired. And you look at his Walt Harris loss. I mean, if I'm a heavyweight and I'm getting into a fight with Walt Harris, if it's an MMA fight, I'm trying to do everything under the sun except have a kickboxing match. And you chose to have a kickboxing match. And so I think that's also a lesson, right? Like you kind of learn, let me watch tape on a guy. Let me, Curtis, if you look at the guys that have fought Walt Harris recently, they're kind of exposing that, right? I think the way Overing dealt with him, there was a big reason why we took him at that plus 170.
Yeah.
He is that technical god at heavyweight, right? When it comes to striking and the groundwork that you kind of get away with against a guy like Walt Harris seems to be pretty good because he does tire himself out in that first round because he does go for such power shots. But, our boy Spivak definitely hit some big ones and felt them, right? And that's right. I think that's a big lesson for him too, right? Against a guy like Vanderaa, you might want to take a step back, not maybe get into this grueling punching match, because if for any reason he gets on top of you, I think this is a guy who can wrestle fairly well and he's going to try and keep you down and he's going to try and ground and pound you out. That's his style. So you want to avoid that, right?
Yeah, get him tired early and then see where those second and third rounds take you. So let's dive right into the line here. Who do you see being the favorite and by how much?
You got to give it to Spivak, man. I think there's such a technical edge there. I think if this fight gets out of the first round, even the lines are going to look kind of interesting there. My question is, I don't know how big of a favorite to make him. He's the kind of guy if Pies asked me, prop bet that I would be looking into just based on the chin that I've seen and the tiredness from Spivak. Even a decision from Spivak. I wonder if that's even close to plus 200. You know what I mean? Even a line makes me wonder what to really think there. So I'm going to have to go with Spivak at a minus 275. I want to say minus 300, but I'm going to go with minus 275 because I had minus 250 written down. Minus 275.
And that minus 275 gets you right in that 50 point bell range. So, let's give him a round of applause. Hear that bell going. And, he comes in at a minus 225 favorite. So right on the, outskirts of your 50-point range there. We don't have those prop bets yet, but I can imagine that him by decision is going to be very juicy. I do believe that the KOs are going to be pretty favored in this one. And we might actually see some really good value on Spivak to win in the points.
Yeah, so that was kind of the other thing, right? I really valued his experience pretty high there when you think about it. So even for you, I mean, do you have an idea of where you see Vanderaa kind of having success? Even from a betting perspective, if this guy kind of strolls in, closes out at almost a plus 200, I mean, he's got good size. He's got the chin. I mean, if Spivak's gas tank doesn't last, I'm just wondering, do you see enough? Because that's the one thing that we've been talking about lately, right? It's just especially in public plays, the kind of walk away, even in our own bets. But these are the kind of fights where you kind of have to judge, is there too much to bank on hypothetically?
And in any heavyweight fight bout, I think we know that anything can truly happen. It just takes one punch for this to go either way. Honestly, man, if from what we've seen in the limited, videos we have on Vanderaa and stuff, if he's not winning this in the first, 2 to 3 minutes, I don't see a scenario where he can do enough in the later rounds to win this one. So if there was a scenario where we wanted to sprinkle on Vanderaa, maybe a first round finish would be something to look at. But, if he does get out of that first round, I think this is Spivak's, about to lose.
Mm-hmm. And I can kind of agree with that. And so that's where I was kind of seeing like where you see yourself gauging that minus 225 value, because, frankly, I just see very limited ways for Vanderaa to pull this off unless, because Spivak's takedown defense could be something that comes into play. But I think it looks fairly, it looks like it can compete. I think so.
Yeah, for sure. And in an ideal world, we see Vanderaa come out in the first round gunning and doing his thing and getting tired closer to the end of the round, but winning the round and just getting phenomenal value on Spivak to win rounds 2 and 3.
Especially live, they might eat those that value, but you're right. Like, I think even when we see these kind of extra lines, it'd be interesting what you think. I'll definitely be picking your brain on those.
Yeah, absolutely. So stay tuned for that one, and we'll lock something in a little closer to next Saturday. Perfect. And that takes us on to the next fight. It's a featherweight bout between Darrick Minner and Charles Rosa. Minner, he comes in with a 25-11 record and somehow made his UFC debut in 2020. So, that was a little mind-boggling to me.
Crazy.
How do you have like 30 plus fights coming into the UFC? But
and those are those guys, right? They've just been around. When you scroll down, like, you might finally see a guy like, oh my God, I know him.
I've seen some highlight video of him for sure. So, he did fight twice in 2020. He did lose to Grant Dawson via rear naked choke. And then he defeated TJ Laramie, I believe, by a guillotine choke in September.
Canadian boy. Yeah.
Yeah. Give us a little more on Mr. Minner here. Minner or Minner?
It's Minner. He had a massive win against the guy that you actually remember. It was a Dana White Contender Series, and this Canadian boy just looked so good. But I think it was a classic case of, I would call it good matchmaking. You gave a really hot kid someone who had to at least, he brought that regional experience to a guy who needed to see that, because that's what makes UFC fighters, you know what I mean? Especially in those guys that kind of work their way up to a certain level over the course of their career. Minner, I think, has a huge record for a guy that's, just hitting his 30s. So the way I see it, there's again, man, like those types of fights where you kind of want to just, what do they call those popcorn fights, right? Like you just kind of sit back and watch. Sometimes you really can't make those final calls because it's such a huge discrepancy between experience and just hot fire coming out of previous fights, and that's what Vegas seems to judge them on.
Yeah, and touching on experience, we got Charles Rosa on the other side here. He only sports a 13-4 record, and when I say only, I just mean by 17 total fights. But this is a guy who's been in the UFC since 2014, man. Like, what the hell is going on there?
It's crazy.
Yeah, that was actually pretty surprising to me. So he has gone 4-4 in the UFC. So all 4 of his losses have come in this league. But this guy doesn't really like to fight that often either. Once a year, max twice.
Yeah, and it's crazy because he's the kind of guy that if you talk to fighters, he's the kind of guy that everybody loves, everybody knows. I think he has a really good reputation amongst his peers, and he's a great fighter in all areas. When you look at even the Aguilar fight, it was just such a close fight. And we had Charles Rosa, but I thought that fight was probably going to be a bit less closer than it was. I think you probably had you on the edge of your seat a little bit. So I think that's where you kind of see a guy like Rosa, right? The constant improvement and getting really good, but also being such a good veteran of the sport. So you kind of find him in these weird fights where he gets a veteran where he can kind of make a name for himself, but then also has to play gatekeeper once in a while. It's how you come out of those fights that really make the next 2 or 3 when it comes to your schedule.
For sure. And, like you said, you touched on the Aguilar fight in June. That was a good win for him. Prior to that, he did lose to Bryce Mitchell in the year by unanimous decision. So, this is going to be an interesting one. Let's dive right into the line here. Who do you see being the favorite here?
I mean, you kind of touched on one of the wins, but when you look at Rosa's losses, right? It's Dennis Seaver, Yair Rodriguez, Shane Burgos, and Bryce Mitchell. Like those are all very, very credible losses. You know, those are going to make you better fighters. And it was the ones that we could kind of talk about, right? Playing gatekeeper to Bryce Mitchell, Burgos, like all these guys. You know, if he won that Seaver fight, who knows where, you know, Charlie Rosa would be as a UFC fighter right now. So I think that the TJ Laramie fight might give him a little bit too much of a bump, and I'm not going to buy into that, and I don't think Vegas is either.
Okay.
I also don't think that, like, if you ask me from experience and just from overall, like, athleticism, I think the way he caught TJ Laramie, like, I don't think you're catching Rosa like that personally.
No.
And so I am going to go with Rosa as the favorite, but I think I'm actually going to have to give him a very respectable line because I am going to show some respect to that experience in the regional scene. And so I'm going to go with Rosa minus 170.
Oh my God, man. What is this shit, yo? We might have to actually change this fucking game, man.
He dropped an F-bomb again. See, that's you wait for bells, I wait for F-bombs, because that's true emotion for me. That is bringing out you at the absolute max, and I'll take that all day over my guy.
No, give me my guy. Give me my guy. I need my guy here. You know, that's another showcase showdown win. He's a minus 175 favorite within.
Jeez, bro. How am I?
Yeah.
Wow. I'm basically.
I don't know what you're doing
you
here. You
forced me to think like Vegas now, and now that's basically what I'm doing. Wow.
So, you know, let me ask you, at that minus 170 line, do you see any value there?
Yes, I do. I think from an MMA perspective, I 100% do, because on paper, even the guys that Rosa has lost to, think about the people that they've gone on to fight after. Do you know what I mean? Like, these are all guys who could have been in title contention. Bryce Mitchell is on his way to title contention. Shane Burgos had a beautiful fight against I might have to look this one up. Emmett. No, it's Josh Emmett. I don't need to look it up. Josh Emmett. And Josh Emmett fought on a torn ACL.
Wow.
And knocked him out, bro. You kidding me right now? So, like, those are the guys that Rosa's losing to, you know? Like, Emmett should have fought for a title if he'd stayed healthy. You know what I mean? Like, the stuff we see from some of these guys, to me, it's just like, if you play that snakes and ladders, if you will, I think Rosa's where he belongs. I think he deserves to be even maybe a bit more of a favorite, in my personal opinion. But I think the respect there for what he did against TJ Laramie and the regional scene experience, like, people are going to see that record and be like, you know what? Like, I don't understand why he's this low. But again, like, the way he locked up that guillotine, you know, that's experience. Like, TJ Laramie had zero chance of getting out of there. You know what I mean? Like, this man pulled guard so quickly and just had his arm ready. He's like, nah, this is in. And I just went to the ground and had it locked. It was beautiful. And I just think that Rosa is not going to have it look that easy. I just can't. And that's where I think right now that line kind of suggests that he might be able to lose that way. And I just don't see it, man. Like, those are very credible losses on his record. And it seems like the line is where it should actually be. So, you know, once we do get the secondary markets, we can kind of look at maybe a decision victory here, or, you know, it doesn't seem like either of these guys really get finished that often. So, and if Minner comes out with a massive finish, man, think about that. Woo, that's a guy who just locks up 2 big finishes to start his UFC career after losing to Herbert Burns on the Dana White Contender Series. Like, come on now. Like, that's huge. That's big for him. Yeah, that's huge.
And we could see some stupendous numbers on that for sure.
Yeah,
absolutely. So stay tuned for that one. We'll be sure to lock something in a little closer to the fight.
If we want to touch it, but that could be one of those.
Yeah, might just be a popcorn fight here.
Because this fight is at featherweight, and I mean, let's be real. One guy is used to fighting a little bit larger, and so it's going to be interesting, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, you know, that takes us to our next fight on deck. We got a featherweight scrap here between a couple of dudes who have some outstanding records, man. We got Chaz Kelly coming in with 18-3 record, taking on Jamall Emmers, who has an 18-5 record, man. These are insane here. So, you know, let's dive into Chaz a little bit. Like we said, 18-3 record. Been in the UFC since 2014, man. He's gone 7-3 there. Another dude who doesn't seem to fight that often, but his last fight was in 2019. He got a unanimous decision victory against Jordan Griffin. One thing that kind of stood out to me is apart from that one, all of his other fights have literally been by KO or some sort of finish.
It's like just straight excitement, right?
Oh man, that got me amped for sure.
Hondo. Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, we'll see if he can keep that going or what the finished numbers look like.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other side, we got Jamall Emmers, 18-5 record. The pretty boy, and that's not me calling him that. That's his name. So take no offense to that one. But he made his UFC debut in 2020 against who, Siraj?
You know who, my man?
Oh, tell me.
Is it your favorite guy?
Oh, it's and when you say it, it becomes my favorite. Yeah.
Geek got. But if you go further down, just to quickly touch on Julian Erosa, right there, right? He lost to Julian Erosa, and by how? Head kick. Julian Erosa pulling out those big long kicks, and it's funny, right?
Legs, man.
I wanted to take you further down there because I wanted to take you to Thiago Moises, your favorite boy.
Oh yeah.
You screwed your boy Bobby Green. Screwed your boy Bobby Green out of a win, in your opinion. And I've actually seen a lot of people agree with you, man. Like a lot of people had Bobby Green winning that fight. Yeah, man. It's you're not alone there.
I just thought that was my bias in there for sure.
Not at all. Not at all. There's a lot of people that agree.
Damn, so that's a pretty credible history for Mr.
Exactly,
Jamall,
right? Yeah, and so that's what takes me into Chaz Kelly, right? Like this guy also was just. You look at his names at the time, the people he fought were big names. Like Jason Knight's a champion in smaller organizations at some point in his career.
Mm-hmm.
These are the kind of guys where you didn't take those next steps. And I really believe that when you look at Skelly, he just had like a massive injury, right, in training camp. So he's out in Sanford MMA. Like he has good camps. And, he recently just talked about how he had to go through surgery. It was so bad that, they didn't even know if he should be fighting again and that kind of stuff. And it took him that long to recover. And he's even talking about how, like, if things like this kind of happen more, he's going to have to consider retirement, how he wants to get into being an analyst and a commentator more. So it's like, I don't want to say the 1 foot out the door mentality, but like this guy's giving it his all when he can, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And it's just for him, it's like when he can. And so he's talking about his age and all that kind of thing. So again, when you look at the record, when you look at the people he was supposed to fight and has fought, if it wasn't for these, injuries and these surgeries, like he had a really good chance. Problem is he's not the best. He's not the best striker, to be honest. And I really like what he brings from an all-around MMA game. But a guy like Emmers, man, like we're talking about here. Like this guy lost a split decision to Giga Chikadze, who, he might be the biggest name that no one's really talking about on this side of the world, because I think he's blowing up back home. I think he's blowing up amongst the diehards, guys like you who are just following fights through and through. Whether you're starting within the last year or not, like that's a guy who you will remember. Like he's just putting on performances, and that's where the competition, right? You have to always chalk it up to the kind of competition. Despite our boy Chaz seeing it when he was younger, like this could be the new crop.
Yeah, and it's funny, you're literally confirming the lopsided nature that I thought this was kind of playing out to be, given the names that Jamall has seen recently, and the kind of veteran aspect Chaz has been taking, as of late. So let's dive right into the line here. We kind of have a lean on the favorite here. So what number are you seeing here, man?
Well, it's interesting because, like, if you look at the Tapology rankings, Skelly outranks him pretty large. So it's really kind of funny, but playing recency bias based on the Vegas mentality, like I got Emmers as the favorite here, and based on little things like that makes me think I have him too high, but I'm gonna trust that these are the kind of guys that people like to pound, and so I'm gonna go Emmers at a -220.
Oh man, So yeah, give him a bell. I'm tired of hearing this goddamn bell. So just give him a bell. But I'm not gonna lie, man. You were like 10, 15 basis points off from me just leaving this room and ending this. But I believe you had said -220. Looking it up live, he is a -200. Right.
If you guys didn't know, he was probably gonna call me a cheater at this point and walk out.
Oh, hey, you nailed this -200. That's the end of UFC Vegas 19. It's been a pleasure. I'll see you next time. So, -200, right in line with what you're thinking. And honestly, I think that's a fair line. And when you when you look at all the things that have unfolded recently, you know, the level of prospect that this guy is, you know, I think it's an accurate line. I think it's a fair line.
The problem that this scares me is you look at Emmers' like on record takedown defense, it's literally 100%. And I think Skelly's like number one area is to kind of grind fights out, right? Kind of try to work you on the ground. But if Emmers is coming in as a superior athlete who's like switching stance and mixing up really well on the feet and keeping him at the distance, you know, like really being able to keep him at that distance. Because like if you ask me, avoiding the work up against the fence and being taken down, like that's money for Emmers, in my opinion, because I think he has the pedigree to kind of fight almost anywhere. But I just think that if you're trying to play into your strength and your opponent's weaknesses, it really seems like the striking battle would be where he can kind of separate himself a bit. And he's proven himself, right? Like I think a split decision loss to a guy like Giga when you're primarily striking with him is a big deal. To Julian Erosa loss, I mean, that's my guy. I mean, he's entertainment for me, you know. Inside
I'm gonna go check those highlights for sure.
Yeah,
I'll see him a man for sure.
Yeah, he's and it's funny because I would love for you to see the highlights of that tough too, because that's who you will fall in love with as well, right? Him as a person, he's just such a sweet guy, you know. And you get to see their family. It's just he's one of those guys that you will remember if you watch the show, kind of thing. And that's where you know, even in terms of being able to put on a show, that's the kind of outcomes you get, right? You don't really know when he's going to put on his best. Michael Johnson, cough, cough, couldn't handle Clay Guida's wrestling. I mean, let's be honest here. This is going to be kind of
that man was just too much of a beast, yo. Like you had texted me on the side. Looks like he could go for another 5 rounds here.
Yeah, that's Guida for you, know. Just Blanca's up and just
I was gonna say those Blanca power ups.
And just electrocutes you for 15 minutes. It's just unless you could do something about it and stay on the feet, you're over. It's over.
Yeah, for sure. So, you know, stay tuned for that one. You know, I do personally believe that motivation is going to play a large factor into this because, you know, Chaz is no joke, man. There's no denying that. So I do believe motivation might play a huge part in this one for him.
The one thing that kind of just, I don't see like huge size differences and stuff like that. So for me, it's just like if this stays on the feet and if it stays at a distance, unfortunately, like I just don't want to see, you know, Chaz just get picked apart. But I mean, it's one of those things where this has the makings of a very, very nice MMA match if things go both of their ways, you know? Like if you see them mix it up quite a bit, I think you're going to see a really fun fight.
Yeah, if they can both execute to their game plans, it's going to be a real treat for sure.
The kind of fight, like, if it went 3 rounds, like, even if you didn't bet on it kind of thing, like, you probably enjoyed that fight, man.
Enjoy it, yeah. Absolutely. And so, you know, that takes us into our next bout. We got a nice bantamweight bout on one end. We got a pretty serious vet in Eddie Wineland.
Right?
Well, yeah, it was a real treat learning about this guy, man. Who knew he's been around for so long? And, you know, on the flip side, we got an exciting prospect in John Castaneda, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, let's touch on Eddie for a little bit here. You see, he got that 24-14-1 record. And, man, like I said, he's been in the UFC since 2011, man. That's so crazy. You know, he made his debut on a Shogun John Jones main event.
Right.
Where he took on Uriah Faber. Like, are you kidding me? That's so
And, man, like that John Jones Gustafsson UFC 165 in Toronto, like he fought Hedin Barao. Like that's basically one of Barrao's fights to get to the title, right? Right to TJ.
Been around forever, man. Yeah, that's insane. Nuts. So, you know, he has gone 6-8 in the UFC. You know, so I'm sure he's looking to improve that one. You know, most recently he lost to some crazy names, and you know, most recently he lost to Shane O'Malley back in June. He's lost 3 of his last 4. He's going to be looking to get forward and back rolling on this one. Anything else you want to touch on Eddie before we jump into John here? Yeah,
well, I feel like in that fight, he kind of made Sean O'Malley look the part, right? Like he kind of kept his chin out there. He kind of waited for him to pick his kind of shots, and that's exactly what Sean wants you to do. But when you look at the guys he's fighting before that, John Dodson, amazing fighter, but that's back in 2017. Like that's also when Dodson was pretty much at his towards the end of his prime, approaching that over the whole stage. But he's such a gamer, right? And such a good athlete. Alejandro Perez. I've taught you enough about this man against, rising champion out there. So I think in all those fights, you're kind of seeing Eddie Wineland's like, you know, this is the pedigree. He gets these fights for that reason. Now you're looking at, you know, Castaneda. I really believe, you know, when you look at the fight against Nathaniel Wood we actually sprinkled that finish and it came a little bit close, but the kid's got chin, bro. He's got chin. And he took a lot of big shots from Nathaniel Wood. I think Wood's able to keep really good pressure for 3 rounds. He ate some of his best shots and just kept coming forward. What I didn't like was he didn't have any combos of his own. I felt like he was kind of looping a lot of shots. And when you're looping shots against a guy like Nathaniel Wood, he's coming back with 2 to 3 shots in combos. So his counter striking is just outdoing you and outpointing you both. Like it's a lot to deal with, right? And so in a fight like this, especially when they're supposed to be smaller guys, you want to be the first to attack. And even Eddie Wineland kind of, you saw it against Sean O'Malley. Like he kind of does have that sit back and pick his shots. So, I think that unfortunately, youth and chin might play a massive role in this fight if it stays on the feet. And Eddie is a legend, bro. We're talking legend, WEC legend, like Dominic Cruz. Well, Dominic Cruz for sure, but like the Carlos Condit style, like long time, WEC was part of his prime kind of fighter, like Uriah Faber and Aldo, all those guys, man. Like he's part of that group, right? So he's had a long career. It's really impressive, but again, where we see him kind of taking the shots is where you don't want to see a fighter taking the shot. And this is probably going to break your heart, but there was a report how I think Frankie said that when he woke up from the Corey fight, he had no idea who he fought, and he didn't even remember the training camp leading up to it.
No way.
So it's just so for some of these guys that like are obviously legends of the sport, but are also chinny, it's just like these are the kind of guys that you kind of want to, I feel like Dana's been pretty good with telling the guys that he's really seeing, kind of lose that step to make a decision. But at this point, it's like maybe that needs to be stepped up a little bit more, especially for the sanctity of the sport and that kind of thing, because if Frankie's like coming out public,
we don't want to see these greats go down like this.
It's very similar to football, right? Like when you think about Junior Seau's story and all these guys, right? Like Roman Neliski, like these are men that we looked up to in the 90s, and we're just hearing about what happens to them as they age. And unfortunately, like, if we're going to entertain these things as sport, then these are all things that the athlete, the families, the organizations, the teams all have to consider, right? I think that's going to be a big part of the sports moving forward.
For sure. And so, before we dive right into the lines here, you had mentioned that Nathaniel Wood won a few times, and, we had taken him by finish, and watching that fight, it felt like Nathaniel Wood had the opportunity to finish him quite a few times, but kind of decided to conserve his energy and make sure he can get to the end and not just unload on some of these. Would you not agree with that?
Well, I think what you end up seeing sometimes, bro, is that I think you have to make a conscious decision that if you are fighting a man who legitimately is showing extremely good chin, why waste your energy on power shots
on the finish,
if you know that for those next 2 rounds or 1 round, you are going to have to outpoint him. And that's where like I felt like his energy looked great. His combos did not look worse. He did eat a couple of shots from John, but I don't think that they did much damage per se. I really think that was his fight from the very start. But that was the thing, right? Like just the Castaneda chin. It was just something to marvel, if you will. And to kind of back your point in a weird way, it's like you do kind of make that judgment call in a positive way, though. It's not in a negative way.
Absolutely.
It's
strategic.
Where you kind of, that's where you consider a guy, like if you know fighters really well, like Nathaniel Wood on points, for example, when that Castaneda is coming in with that, because he did get rocked a couple times early. But the thing is, the kid just keeps coming. And that's where I think when you look at the way Wineland gets dumped sometimes, it's a little different, I don't think he's really like kind of pushing forward while he's rock kind of thing. It's more of like it landed clean kind of thing.
For sure. So, let's dive right into these lines. Let's see if we can get this guy off his high train, remove him from that Hogwarts Express here and bring him back to reality here. So where do you see the line landing for this one?
Yeah, so, I mean, here's the thing. Castaneda hasn't been finished for, like, almost a decade. I think it's, like, closer to, like, 7 years or something. But I really do like the unders. If we could see that, I would have loved it. But I have to give Castaneda the edge here. I think the youth, I think that the Nathaniel Wood fight, if it was any, preamble to what we can see, it's, like, a bit more of the cleanup on the feet. The chin, man. It's the chin. And I think you have to see that, on the reverse side of Wineland kind of being towards the end of his career. So I am going to have to go with Castaneda as a favorite. And I don't know if that's surprising or not, because I do think that that's the Vegas call. You know what I mean? And the line, can he be a minus 200? I don't think so. So I'm going minus 170 Castaneda.
Finally, just outside the range. I don't have to hear this bell again.
Or your boy, okay.
I've been seeing too much of this guy, man.
Right?
He's gonna start popping up in my dreams here. So this is actually a pick'em, man. It's actually nobody's favorite in this one. It's an actual pick'em.
And I can see that. And so for me, man, like keep an eye on that under. Let's see what that looks like. It might not be very juicy, but if it's anything close to that minus 150, bro, I can see it just going that way,
Yeah.
I think both guys like to bang, and it'll be interesting to see if Castaneda really is just gonna go 3 rounds with him, because he hasn't been finished, and Wineland has finished people who are relatively chinny, but unfortunately this man is not. So that's where I think we're gonna hedge that a little bit and just like take the under, because I kind of like Castaneda at that pick'em, given where my original line was, if I was, kind of in your shoes too. But at the same time, like, why not kind of take that under and enjoy the fight, depending on where the line is. But I think we'll be revisiting that specific fight a bit closer.
Absolutely. I need to see what that finishes for Mr. Castaneda. So, yeah, stay tuned for that one. And that takes us right into our next one. It's the first ladies fight on the card. Excited about this one. On one end, we got Shanna Dobson. On the other end, we got Casey O'Neill. Got a little trivia for you here. Let's see how well you know your boy here. So when you think of a woman and you hear the last name O'Neill, who do you think of?
Hear the last name O'Neill. Who do I think of? I think of 2 people, which is kind of funny that they're in the same spot. I think of Shaq and Jeff O'Neill.
Something else.
It's Shaq and Jeff O'Neill.
No, lady.
Oh, I'm so sorry. O'Neill, lady O'Neill.
It's a tough one. And I got to make sure I got her name right. Imagine this isn't her name.
Oh, that was
that's her name.
Okay. And sorry, she's an athlete?
No, she's a fictional character.
Oh, she's a fictional character. Is she from Peaky Blinders?
No, man. She's from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. April O'Neil.
Oh, April O'Neil. Okay. It's so funny. You have me on this like European trend, and I'm like, I'm just gonna throw a guess up because I know this man's been watching a lot of Peaky, so I'm gonna just go with that.
But I will say I gotta commend the Shaq guess because that's my boy.
This man said woman though, so I was really way off. This man just wanted to hear Shaq.
Oh man! But anytime I hear O'Neill as a lady, I think of April O'Neil. So that was my
That's so
Ninja
good.
Turtles rant.
I love that. She was fine, both cartoon and not.
100%. That long curly hair, I'll deal with that shit for sure.
Yellow
man.
jacket. Whew.
Yes, it's exactly what I'm picturing. Return of the Ooze, man.
Right? That's my favorite. Oh, that was my favorite. But it's funny. Watch that when you're older. You're like, man, this is juvenile.
Terrible.
You go to the first,
Terrible.
You go to the first one. The first one is mind blowing.
Oh man, I felt the same way when they got added on Netflix. So, let's dive into this fight now. We got Shanna Dobson on one end, 31 years old, and she sports a 4-4 record. She did beat Ariel Beck in Tough 26 finale, but she has gone 1-3 in the UFC since. She lost actually her first 3 bouts to Lauren Mueller, Sabina Mazo, and Priscilla Caceria. And
Caceria a good fighter too. So like that's kind of like with her, you see this weird shift between like women fights like the old days, right? Like you just kind of it's such an MMA match.
Anybody can beat anybody, yeah. Truly. And so, she did bounce back in August. She got a win against Maria Agapova. And, another thing that was crazy to me to see is that a lot of her fights don't make it to decision, man. Someone is finishing these fights.
Well, like if you look at the way she even lost those decisions, I mean, the way you screwed me up with the way you said it's Agapova. Maria Agapova.
When I say Agapova,
Yeah, it's like because it is Kornikova and all that, so it's like it's.
I know it's all the tennis names mess me up.
Yeah, and there's going to be more and more of the Eastern European and Russian names, so we best get used to it. So, the thing about that fight, if you remember, man. Could we talk about a fighter who went from looking really good in one fight to just absolutely weird in the next fight? Like she approached it very weird. I felt like you had a true veteran kind of expose how easily it was to defend what you're bringing to the table, right? Constant volume striking with no real, accuracy, if you will. It was very much a whirlwind of strikes, and Dobson kind of just. She was that damage and just kind of did her own thing after that, right? Agapova was exhausted. She's absolutely exhausted, and you can tell.
Now I see why you enjoy it from the other end so much,
right? 100%. Now you're just gonna say all these names funny just to throw me off, right? Oh, it's gonna be fun. It's like, now you got a way to get me back for the bells too. So I mean. I really thought that if you have to be smart about it, right? I don't think Maria's going to look the same in her next fight. So when you look at Casey O'Neill, hasn't fought in the UFC yet. You look at her highlight reel. She's a tiger MMA fighter. Her striking is going to be there. What I kind of saw with her fights, I'm not lying to you. It was the same thing as Agapova. I thought that she was just constantly bum rushing. I thought that she was trying to take the person down. I thought that she was trying to force it. With Dobson, you saw the exact same thing with Maria, who was coming in at almost a minus 1,000 or a minus 800 favorite there. Yeah. I mean, it was kind of, it was just like, it was a tough pill to swallow for anyone watching because it was also a tough fight to watch, right? Like the irresponsibility, the lack of just ring IQ or Octagon IQ. Hey, you got me there too, bro. I said ring instead of Octagon.
Messing this man up here.
It's interesting, right? I really believe that Dobson's proving that her experience is going to come in handy with some of these newer fighters, and whether she's getting lucky or not with another one, like we're talking about a girl who has really good training camps, and I think if this is a striking battle, it could be a little tough, but as an MMA fighter, I just think she's going to really be able to put it on Casey O'Neill because she has to make sure that it stays on the feet because I think Casey's going to try to mix it up, but the wrestling you got to give Dobson, right?
Yeah, and honestly, this looks like one that's going to be one of the tougher ones to call, man. Got a nice prospect here with 5-0 record. Not a lot of history on her. We got one vet on the other end, very scrappy. Has ability to win any fight she's in. It seems, right? So. Yeah, it's going to be a close one. Let's dive right into the odds there. Who do you see being the favorite here?
Well, I think Dobson just proved to be a really smart fighter in her last fight, right? Even if she's not a wrestling type fighter, if she wants to keep the fight standing the whole time and just keep throwing, she looks like a good striker, a smart one, which I don't mind. But I still think she takes a lot of shots. She just got, a fighter that was just very responsible the last one. So this is one of my hardest fights to pick because
it's a tough one to call, man. It's a tough one.
Yeah, like I want to give Dobson an edge, but it's just like Casey O'Neill looks the part against maybe, even a bad day Dobson, right? Like that was a great day for Dobson in the Octagon, but look at the person across from her. Like, could you be more irresponsible, right? Like, I think Maria's actually a really good fighter. She has a lot of potential, but the length and everything looked great, but I don't know. That was tough. So when you have to level that all up, it's just really hard. But recency bias, UFC newcomer, let's give Dobson a line. I'll give you a bone too and probably not get a bell on this, but I think that Vegas will show her a minus 200 line.
Wow. All right. So, let's put that bell away. We don't have to deal with that one today.
Dog. She's the dog again. I knew she's a dog.
She is the dog. She's a plus 150 dog, man. Casey O'Neill actually comes in at a minus 175. And, based on what, I've researched here, what you've kind of reaffirmed for us here, this is anybody's fight, man. It's not to say that, somebody is deserving of a minus 200 based on what we've seen on paper here. So might be a little bit of value on Dobson, but this going either way would not surprise me.
Well, that's the thing, right? So the way the Vegas lines technically work is usually recency bias and that kind of thing. But again, Dobson just doesn't look like she's, she doesn't bring that much to the table, I guess, when you think about it, to merit that kind of a line. Like, I guess when you're starting to see those lines, everyone has a really strong suit. She just looked like the better wrestler, the better cardio in that last fight. And so the bump I thought would be there. But you know what, man? I guess Vegas fooled me a little bit there too, right? So I like the line personally. If I'm looking at this, I also think an over doesn't look so bad because, I mean, I think that these guys might try to go a little bit deep. I think they have the ability if they can't land a lot of power shots. But again, this girl's also lost in less than a minute via uppercuts. So it might be a, ooh, nice.
Yeah.
Next.
Exactly. No outcome here would surprise me. So stay tuned for that one. As the prop bets and stuff do get released, we'll see if there's any value on the overs and let you guys know.
And keep an eye on Casey O'Neill, right? A Tiger Muay Thai type fighter coming in. Like, if she puts on a show, man, like, keep an eye out for what we could consider another UFC prospect who might hit our prospect watch in the coming months.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, that takes us into the main event of the prelim card. Again, take that with a grain of salt.
This is amazing.
This could easily move into the main card or fluctuate with other fights. So, we're going to coin it as the main event of the prelim first. But, we got a nice featherweight bout here between Flash Gordon, who we've touched on a few times.
You love that name.
Of course, man. Of course. And he's actually doing justice to the name, apart from the other, Flash Gordon here. And, he'll be taking on Danny Chavez here. So Flash Gordon comes in with a 16-4 record. He has gone 4-3 in the UFC since entering it back in 2017. Most recently, his loss came at the hands of your boy here, Charles Oliveira, in 2019 via
pretty crazy, right? KO. Like the names that he's seeing when you look at he might not be someone that people are talking about, but that's one thing that I guess you're kind of learning de facto from me. It's like, it's not about like learning the guys' names. It's like, look at who they fought and look at who they've lost to. That's how you figure out, really who's kind of at least approaching a certain level, because like either they look terrible against, above average, UFC fighters, or they look, just as terrible against championship level fighters. And it's like, do you consider that a loss in MMA? Probably not, bro. Probably not. Like, that's an experience fight.
And honestly, I think we've seen that recently in a bunch of guys who have these deceiving records, right? You're like, oh, this guy's 8-8 in the UFC. He's 4-3 in the UFC. How is he still around, right? But then you dive into them and you're like, oh, yeah, it's because he's fighting OGs here,
You're so like that's bang on, right? Like that's 100% bang on.
Yeah, for sure. So he did bounce back with the unanimous decision win in 2020 against Chris Fishgold. So looking forward to seeing him getting back in the ring. Danny on the flip side, another immaculate record, right? 11-3, exciting young prospect here. Well, not young, he's actually older than Flash Gordon, but exciting prospect in here. That's actually won 4 in a row. He made his UFC debut at UFC 252. Taking on TJ Brown and winning that one in decision. So, really looking forward to this. One thing I got to ask you, man, I don't even know if I have the answer to this, but reading up on this guy, it seems like on the message boards, there's a lot of talk about a cuckold situation with him. You know anything about this?
It's not the part of MMA that I choose to look into, because if I found out a lot about some of these fighters' personal lives, I'm sure that some of them would throw me right off, I've been exposed to a little bit back in the early days when things were a little bit more exposed for what you're looking for, but no, sir. No, sir. Right. Shall we do it?
Yeah, it was just surprising, man. I'm reading up on some of his past bouts, and literally the comment sections are just flooded about the fact, how are you going to let your wife do this and stuff? I'm like, man, what the hell happened here?
Jeez. No, I mean, we're probably going to do some research off the clock here, because like that just has me kind of wondering. It's funny because like even to bring the conversation back to MMA, I had a follow-up question for you anyway. And it's like when you kind of talk about the records, right? Like you go down his list. I mean, you talk about the promotions that he's fought for. You talk about the people that he's lost to. It's a little bit different, right? Wouldn't you say that you kind of get a different vibe when you look at a guy like Jared Gordon? Because for me, Jared Gordon and Danny Chavez, to you, there's nothing really separating them until you kind of dive into them,
In fact, you might just clearly look at record and give Danny the edge, right? And it's like, whoa, hold up, man. If you look at those 4 losses that Jared Gordon has, like those amount for 3-4 of your wins.
100%. Especially with that like first UFC loss to our boy Diego Ferreira, like who just looked the part against, you know. I thought that fight was beautiful against Dariush, and Dariush just came out as the man that deserves the next step, and he's looked the part too. Yeah. So these are the kind of guys where you just want to see if they keep giving him these kinds of fights, like what happens. Because one thing about Danny Chavez I want you to keep in mind is, his striking looked very accurate. Like the way he kind of landed some of his shots that can drop guys. I mean, he waits and punches. You know those guys that kind of look, wait, boom, kind of. He has those shots, and I mean, you got to be like, those are the scarier fighters to kind of keep an eye on, especially against guys who like to volume strike, keep their hands down, because not everybody's moving their head like Max Holloway. Not everybody's moving their feet like Max Holloway, and punching at the same time and coming at you with 3 times, 4 times more punches than you can possibly throw. It's just like, that's the different cup of tea, right? And that's what makes this fight a little scary because I think whoever picks their shot here could drop a man.
All right. So, safe to say we'll be looking at some unders here, but let's dive right into the line. Who do you see being the favorite on this one?
I mean, it's weird, right? I think that Chavez is one of those scary guys that I just don't want to go against, man, because no one's ever knocked him out, right? Like it's really hard for me. And Gordon has been finished by strikes. And so for me, I'm loving unders in this, so I hope we can look into those. But I think you have to give Gordon the edge here. I think Gordon deserves the edge from a Vegas perspective. I don't see any reason for him not to be. And I think from a Vegas end, based on how most of these fights go, I'm still giving him a minus 200.
Yeah, so to be honest, man, I was surprised when I saw this line myself, because I expected Gordon to be the favorite as well. Chavez comes in as a slight favorite, minus 125 here.
And man, I'll be honest with you. If he was the dog, I was going to tell you, man, the sprinkle there is not a bad option. I really don't see, because the way you want to approach the fight is really just kind of valuing the fighter based on that number. And I could see his style being an issue, at least for Gordon. Like Gordon's going to move his feet. He's going to try to land shots, and he can mix it up fairly well. But yeah, I was really impressed with the way Gordon was able to pick his punches. And sorry, I was really impressed with the way the other man was able to pick his punches. And I think that Chavez, if he does kind of get that shot in, especially late, if both men are a little bit, off their power leg and kind of just trying to throw for points, this is the kind of guy you want to watch out for.
Absolutely. So stay tuned for this one. It looks like we are going to be looking at some unders. So when those lines get released, if we do end up taking anything, we'll be sure to let you know.
For sure.
All right. So that takes us into the main card, man. And let me tell you, I'm pumped for this one, man. So many beautiful heavyweight fights.
I know, right? This is a Pies present for sure. And we know that they're going to probably pick some fights from the bottom and add them. Like, I don't see why you wouldn't, especially on a non pay-per-view main card, I wouldn't be upset if this was even a 6-fight main card. With with the 2 of these fights kind of popping up. We'll see what happens, though. There's still some time.
Wouldn't mind seeing Phil Hawes moved up here for sure. So,
let's
start with this one. We got a heavyweight bout between Andrei Arlovsky and Tom Aspinall.
That's your boy.
You can tell I'm excited for this card.
Right?
This is going to be a great one, man. Arlovsky comes in 30-19 record, 42 years of age. And man, did he surprise us in his last fight. That's for damn sure, man. He has constructed a 9-9 record in the UFC. But again, don't let that record fool you.
He's also a past champion, right? He's an ex-UFC heavyweight champion.
Who are his losses against? Stipe, Overeem, Ngannou, some of the beasts, man. And it looks like he's really revived his career, man. He's gone 3-1 in his last 4. Wins against Ben Rothwell, Philip Lins. Most recently, we saw him against Tanner Boser, man. We were pretty high on Tanner Boser. Nice prospect here, Canadian boy. And man, Arlovsky dusted him, man. That was an impressive victory.
Straight striking footwork, like levels, right? Chess game that we talk about. Like that was just a guy who was 100% 4 to 5 steps ahead of you. You go in with certain, like that's the thing, there was a certain commentator who talked about it, and it was probably Dominic Cruz. I want to give him the edge on that statement, but he just talks about how when you rely on even say a 1-2 punch combo or 2 type power shots that you kind of throw, unfortunately against the guy who's either been in there for a while or trains heavily in striking, especially boxing where footwork is so important because you can't really throw kicks. So your feet are fundamentally all about keeping your hips moving and keeping you on your bicycle, as they say, right? So that's where like you're seeing the difference. I think Tanner Bozier's a wonderful MMA striker. I think he brings a lot of that as a prospect in the middle of the pack type of thing, but you said it best. He got humbled. He got humbled really well. Yeah. And I think that's where you kind of got to give Arlovsky a good bump, and this is a big fight.
Yeah, and you got to give him that credit, man. Like he looked to be in great shape. He did not look 42 years of age. He looked to be the better in shape man, and I got to give him credit for that. So 100%. Looking forward to seeing him back in the Octagon on Saturday. And, now he's taking on a seriously exciting young prospect in Tom Aspinall. We've talked about this guy before, 9-2 record. He's won 5 in a row. He's blasted onto the UFC scene, 2-0 there. Impressive wins. Jake Collier, Alan Baudot, both in 2020. Obvious thing to note on this guy is that it never gets to decision. This guy is a finisher, man.
100%.
I'm excited about this one. I don't think this is your normal heavyweight fight here, man. We're going to see 2 dudes in shape, ready 100%. To go.
And this is the thing, right? The Tanner Bozier fight was so good, right? In the sense of like you saw such good back and forth striking, and it's just the chess match, right? You have to appreciate, especially if heavyweights can do it for 3 rounds. You have to respect that because we're talking about how it's such a dying breed to watch some of these guys be that technical for 3 rounds. And I think, yes, Bozier got humbled, but he got humbled by one of the greatest heavyweights the UFC has ever seen. You know what I mean? Yep. We just talked about how like there's certain losses that aren't real losses, and that's a great one for Tanner Bozier so early in his UFC career. So now let's go into Tom Aspinall in the exact same position. You know what I like about Aspinall, I guess, in terms of comparing the two? One, size. Aspinall's a true heavyweight. He's the truest of heavyweights. He really is. Like, he carries that weight very well. That's like that football style, like that's what he looks like, and the thing is that the other area where I kind of we touched on the footwork, right? I think that's where Arlovsky was really able to kind of pick a bit of a difference, right? Because Bozier landed so many good shots. It's crazy when you think about it. Like, I'm actually like looking back at them even right now. Like, you look at the fight and it's insane how close he really was. And so that's where, for me, you go into Aspinall's numbers. It's kind of insane, right? Despite only having 2 fights, I think they're slightly gimme fights because one was also on short notice. Like, you talk about Spivak, right? I think if that fight happened, both these guys would have had a better opportunity to see where they'd be right now. That's the one thing I feel very sad for Aspinall is that he had some opportunity to. He could have probably fought 3 or 4 times last year, but unfortunately, like, fights are falling out, and that's where, for me, like, I wish we saw him because this is a guy we would have seen maybe headlining a smaller card, maybe not this level anymore because like guys are being able to kind of Blaydes Lewis. Vegas card is a big deal. So I think that would have just been the area that he's in. Maybe if it's a co-main, like he would have been able to attract that kind of bump. If he did fight 3 to 4 times last year, I almost guarantee that. And so, it makes you think about going from Spivak to Arlovsky, which is oceans apart, in my opinion. And on top of that, because of a short notice win over Alan Baudot, was it Alan Baudot? I'm pretty sure it was. Yeah. So, and we saw Baudot, right? Baudot is the guy who does make people look a little good with how he gets knocked out. So I thought he did a great job of filling in. He's got great length, kind of put him to work in that way a little bit. But look at these numbers, bro. Aspinall's 2 fights against Collier and this man, 11 strikes landed per minute. And then his defense is 71% with only 2.5 strikes absorbed. This man is just going to work. Like, and unfortunately, like, he's never been taken down in those fights. He took mans down in those fights. Like, this is just the perfect test for a guy who, Arlovsky's got 79% takedown defense. So these are the things that you want to kind of keep in mind, because if Arlovsky gets out of the first round, my big point on Aspinall, bro, is anytime he's been in the second round, he's lost the fight. Whether it's whether it's by, the reason of just a disqualification or or an actual heel hook, which was really early in his career, I mean, he still loses the fights in the second round. So my thing with Arlovski, bro, it's like, if this man is able to kind of just somehow, some way withstand those massive, he's taking on a much better boxer, I think, than Tanner Boser. That is 100% my opinion there. This man, he likes to box on the side of his MMA career. Like, I think he started as that. So you're just looking at a guy who's very much ready for this level. And I think there's a massive separation there between Boser and him. And that's where I think he deserved this fight over the Spivak fight. And you can appreciate that since he didn't even fight much last year. You know, that in itself kind of tells you where both of these guys are at in their career, right? But yeah, man, I'm really, really taken aback by that part of it. I just think that's a massive stat that no one's talking about. And if Arlovski somehow, some way lasts that first round, geez, I don't know, man. Like a good fight, it could really be on our hands, man. Arlovski pushing him up against the fence as much as possible. Like, this guy is going to be strong. Like, he's going to be very strong. But Arlovski's been in there with some massive, massive people. He's seen it all. And that's where, like, this. And
he has that grown man strength, yo. He has that grown man strength, yo. So, you know, let's dive into the lines here. Who do you see being the favorite in this one?
I mean, let's be real. I think that everything I said here will line up with the line. I think you have to say that Aspinall has really put on that show. He has not disappointed us. We've taken him in every single fight that we've seen him, and by finish, and it's just never disappointed. So Aspinall usually comes in at between a -200 and a -350 and just rises, a -200 and a -300, and then he just rises up to that 350, 400 range. I don't think in this fight you're going to see much of that rise, but I think his opening line can land somewhere pretty high. I'm going to have to go with Aspinall at a -250.
Wow, very impressive, man, to have that. Let's give him the bell. Let's give him the bell. Ooh. But, you know, what was phenomenal was that breakdown, man. I got to say, the logic on line analysis there, like that was some good stuff, man. And you're right. He's -275, right where you expected it.
Well, thank you for making me pay so much attention to them. So, you know, it's all thanks to you, right?
Moving up to that -300 would not surprise me. And honestly, man, that line analysis was very impressive. That was spot on. I would not have been disappointed with the Showcase Showdown on that one. So, you know, given that line, it's what I expected. You know, we saw it.
Let's go, Pisey. Say it, Pisey. What are you thinking? What are you thinking?
Yeah. How are we not sprinkling here?
Yeah. So it's funny, right? We made the same joke in the Frankie fight, but in the Frankie fight, that's all heart, right? I think in this fight, there is a slight path to victory here. And if you're telling me that he's still getting that -200, -250 bump, I mean, yeah, I would say that's a sprinkle today, because I don't know if, like, who's betting this line up? You know what I mean? Like, are people going to see this like us and be like, well, you know what? Arlovski took a guy down who exactly did this, but Aspinall is I think, a little bit further ahead than Boser when it comes to that advanced level striking, especially as pure boxer. That's why if Arlovski can even get it in a clinch, if he can get this up against the fence somehow, some way, man, you know, I think it goes either way, right? You want to, again, that's the weird thing about it, right? I think this is one of those fights where if you go look at the finish in the first round, I can see Aspinall's line just similar to Khalil Roundtree's. Remember we looked at that one and joked, like, who's taking a minus
that
110?
Like a plus 150 or something.
No, bro, a minus 110. Who's taking a minus 110 finish in the first round? That's a joke. That's a joke of a line, in my opinion. And funny enough, when we looked at that, it had me thinking about something similar here, right? When you look at it from the flip side, it wouldn't be surprised based on the bump to see something where, you know, Aspinall ends up to that minus 300 and then is getting some kind of first round finish line at maybe plus 100, plus 110. Because, yeah, man, you have to tell yourself, you know, and it's funny, you make me focus on the Vegas line, but this is one where I was like, no, this is one where the footwork and all that stuff will come into play. And, you know, I've seen Arlovski just get absolutely dusted by some of the biggest power punchers we've seen in the heavyweight division. So there is that chance, you know, if you see Aspinall at plus money for a knockout, I mean, you know, it going both ways. It's all about value at this point and how you see this playing out. For us, it's like in having to make a decision. Oof. I think this might be one of the toughest ones because we've rode Aspinall up until this point. You can make the same argument for Chimaev. Everyone was saying that the Leon Edwards fight was the one to kind of keep an eye on. Well, Aspinall is just so unproven based on who he's fought, despite looking so phenomenal regionally and in the UFC, that this is such a massive jump. You know, such a massive jump.
Huge jump.
And the line only jumped, what, 50 points? That's what kind of blows my mind. Blows my mind.
Very similar to the Tanner Boser line as well. So, you know, kind of stay tuned for that one as the props open up and stuff. We will be looking into that. And, you know, like Siraj kind of touched on, one thing that would stand out to me watching this fight live is if he can get out of the first round, you know, getting a live line on him would be real nice here, because we know Aspinall coming out of the first round does get tired.
Exactly. Well, and it's the thing is, we don't even know if he gets like for sure tired, bro. It's like you're right. Like the one thing you kind of always pitch is like, you know, you can't argue with the you know, ATS lines. Like when you look at a team's record in a certain situation and all those kinds of things, like those things do play a part. And if you don't take them into consideration, streaks are streaks. And so that's where it's like, you know, it plays with the MMA mind a little bit, because that's where you kind of see these dogs coming out. So if Arlovsky's chin holds up or he doesn't take as big of those shots, I mean, come on, man. This is looking like a different fight. Like, could we maybe even sprinkle an Arlovsky finish in the third just for the sake of it? You know? Yeah. Hey, who knows?
Yeah, and honestly, I think you made a great point there. It becomes foreign territory, right? You're used to finishing all your fights in round one. That mentally, that's kind of where you're at. When it doesn't go your way, now there's foreign territory to you, right? And it's like,
and you can make the argument that he's proven that that's happened twice to him. That's the part that throws me off, Paisane. That's the part that throws me off.
And he wasn't able to adapt. So, you know, stay tuned for that one, but we'll have some good stuff for you guys for that one for sure.
And before this man can even talk, I'm actually going to kick this one off, because Pies is probably so excited for this one. And so I want to give him a chance to actually just have some fun chatting. So we do have that classic grappler versus striker in Chris Daukaus versus Alexei Oleinik. And bro, how excited are you? Because I'll get technical about it, but I know you're going to pump me up for the rest of this card because of how much you love Chris. So like, just give it to me.
Oh man, you know I'm thrilled for this one. Look at this card, man. If even two of these fights can perform to their potential, it's going to be
or show up. Like, if as long as these guys are healthy and can make it happen, you know, everyone's praying for you guys. Like, honestly,
this is true. A lot can happen in the next, 8 to 9 days for sure. So, you know, we got Alexei Oleinik here versus Chris Daukaus. First thing that stands out to me, fucking 59 wins, dude. Are you kidding me?
Legend, bro. Just do this.
How have you even fought 60 times, man?
You know, he's earned this from the both of us.
Literally all you
both
can
of us
do
do this for a quick second. Both of us do this for a quick second. And yeah, like he's an absolute Russian legend.
Legend, man. Legend. What a record. 59, 14-1. Just dirty, man. Entered the UFC back in 2014, has gone 8-5 since, and against all the top dudes in the division, man. His wins against Mo Green, Mark Hunt, so many more. You look at those losses, man. Walt Harris, Overeem. And you know, the two dudes that we see headlining this event, Curtis Blaydes, Derrick Lewis. You know, crazy, man. He's fought the best of the best.
Best.
What a way to segue into Blaydes Lewis is to get this treat, right?
Right. It's so true. Like, and that's the best part. Like, you broke it down really well. Like, for me, like, this man is like, his nickname, right? Is it still the boa constrictor? I'm pretty sure. Yeah, the boa constrictor, right?
Yeah.
So like, he literally names himself after a snake. Like, this man is a grappling wizard when it comes to MMA, right? Like, that is his forte. He walks through the punches and he looks for that spot. I mean, against the wrong guys, the wrong things happen, but that's his game plan. And a lot of the time it works, but obviously a lot of the time, especially at some of this level, it doesn't happen so well sometimes.
Yeah, and let's be real here. At age 43 and 70 fights deep, I don't really see you changing your style too much.
Well, yeah, like, you know, when Tapology gets to list your Walt Harris loss, who is actually, like, at the time a 12-7 fighter, as a loss via flying knee and left cross in 12 seconds, Like Walt Harrison built a career off of that.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, man. And so, on the flip side, we got Chris Daukaus. He's making a name for himself. Very excited to see him back in the ring. 10-3 record, gone 2-0 in the UFC. We do remember that KO against Parker Porter, I believe. That was a big one. And the other one against Rodrigo
Nascimento killed that. He killed that. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Absolutely. And both of them, KOs in the first round. So, Daukaus throws. We know this, man. And to see these guys' differing style, it's going to be a treat, man. Who can execute their game plan better?
And so that's the thing with Daukaus, right? Like the one thing that everyone's raving about is just how quick he looks for a heavyweight. He almost has the striking and the stature of like a middleweight in a weird way. And like the guy's a police officer in real life, I was going to say, but like, I mean, yeah, like he's built for tough, if you will. Like, I really think that's what scares me if I'm Alexei Oleinik, because of the way that you like to walk through punches. Unfortunately, very good strikers have been able to kind of find ways to pick you apart. And now Daukaus seems like a fairly smart guy, right? Like if I'm game planning now, why wouldn't I be considering, just making sure that I think his striking, based on what I've seen so far, is good enough to go into this fight as is. So I'm going hard at my grappling all training camp if I'm fighting Alexei Oleinik. I truly believe his striking will stand up no matter what. So it's that side of things that kind of scares me, because like, yeah, if he can stay on the feet, this might be his fight within a few rounds, right? His speed of punches, the way he throws those quick combos, like it's just very uncharacteristic of a heavyweight. And people are just so excited to watch him fight now because we've seen it do it twice. That Nascimento fight, he's such a big name out of the American top team camp, but in reality, like he was an 8-0 fighter going into that fight. We saw how far back his striking is, at least for the UFC level, or even for an MMA level, I think. But in this fight, it's a little different, right? I think Oleinik has been in there with some of the best guys in the world. He's also known that, striking is probably where I need to put my time. Every fight starts standing, right? So I'm a little concerned with just that part of it, because, if Oleinik does get this fight to the ground, you're going to see Chris Daukaus kind of experience a human snake. Yeah.
He'll be in some trouble for sure. So, honestly, man, that's gonna be very tough to call, because it literally comes down to who can execute their game better, right?
Exactly.
So, let's dive into the line here. Who do you see being the favorite in this one?
And you said it best. It is going to come down to who executes the game plan best. I believe the fight starts standing, and Daukaus' striking is so hyped right now, and Oleinik's struggles against good strikers at the UFC level, and given his age and recency bias, it's like you got to go Daukaus. Now, I just think that Vegas will be smart enough to not give the full line there, and so I like, what I mean, like those -200. Like there's just no way you can put this man there. It's just it's tough based on what you have on paper, and so I think they have to go with strikers as they always do, and so I'm going with a -150 line on Chris Daukaus.
Let's give him the bell, ladies and gentlemen. Let's give him the bell. Not a showcase showdown, but within the 50 basis points, he is a -188 favorite.
Wow.
Right near that -200. Yeah, and it's creeping. It's creeping.
Yeah, so Pies, I mean, you know what? I think that I just don't see Oleinik getting that much better in the striking department, to at least... He's just way better than Rodrigo Nascimento. That's kind of where I put things. Do you know what I mean? So I just don't think that Daukaus is going to look as dominant as he is. And so me and Vegas agree on that. But that line, Daukaus was a pretty big dog, no? Like he was a +1, like 80 or something. Because I remember Rodrigo being in that -2 something late range. So
yeah.
And so unfortunately, it's just like you've smartened up. I think you smartened up because exponentially better fighter, I would say, at least maybe in their primes, Oleinik versus Nascimento.
Oh, for sure.
But obviously the lines have adjusted based on what Chris Daukaus has looked like. And like I said, when the striking of a fighter is hyped that much, Vegas is listening, because people will also bet based on strikers. You knock a few guys out, like people fall in love with you. So
yeah. For sure. And I think you touched on it beautifully, right? You don't go from being a +205 dog versus an inferior opponent to now being a near minus 200 favorite against a dude like Oleinik who's seen it all. You know what I mean? That is some serious bump he is getting if you're comparing lines.
And that's where you have to kind of like, where do we judge it? You know, like you've watched him fight a couple times now. I mean, hey man, that striking is very real. He made Parker Porter look like that in their fight, but look how Parker Porter looked in his last fight.
Rebounded from that.
So
you know?
it's just really funny because, like, if you ask me, am I excited? Because unbiasedly speaking, this is one of the best UFC prospects at the heavyweight division I've seen in a very long time. You know, I kind of wanted to, you know, improve the athleticism just a tad, but like, how can you say that when the guy punches that quickly? You know, it's weird because like he wears his bad weight well. Like, it's just really funny because like maybe the man just loves to eat. You know what I'm saying? Like, he just loves to eat and he loves to fight, and he wears the heavyweight frame pretty well for a guy that looks like he should probably be maybe 30 to 40 pounds less. Maybe.
He has the Harden syndrome, man. Likes to lull you to sleep and still somehow blows by you looking heavy. So.
I live and die by that. That's so good.
Man. So yeah, we're gonna be in a real treat for that one. Like Siraj said, man, the fight starts standing. So you got to give the edge to Daukaus there. If he can keep that fight standing, that should be his to lose for sure.
I totally agree, man. And that's where I actually see it being kind of the way it goes, because I just think Oleinik is a little bit too old to withstand that level of striking. You know, it's going to be a lot of volume, which is a little different, you know, and if he doesn't keep his guard up, it's going to be tough.
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, that takes us right into our co-main event. You know, we got a nice, sick women's bantamweight bout here. We got, you know, our girl Ketlen Vieira. We've been waiting for her to get back into the ring. She's taking on Yana Kunitskaya. I believe that's how you say her name. Yeah, you know, I first saw that name and I expected a Japanese fighter. Lo and behold, we got, you know, a girl who goes by the name of Foxy and not a Japanese fighter. So, you know, we know what our girl Vieira here, 11-1 record. You know, wouldn't be surprised to see her get a title shot soon. You know, and winning here would probably go a long way. We saw her most recently beat Sijara Eubanks in a very dominant victory. We were very high on Sijara Eubanks, you know, and Ketlen Vieira just dominated the show there. She is 5-1 in the UFC, with her lone loss being to Irene Aldana back in 2019, where a left hook caught her in the first round. But you know, other than that, just sparkling clean, man. What do you have for us on her?
Yeah, and so, like, you know, for the juice that we got Sijara at, I don't think that was a bad pick, because that was still, you know,
no, not at all.
The judges, you know, didn't have it at 30-27 at all on any card. So I think that we were actually pretty knowledgeable there, if you will. But again, I think that was Ketlen Vieira's warm-up, like tune-up fight. You know what I mean? Irene Aldana is considered a very good striker. So if you remember, that's a flatline KO. That was one of the most beautiful, like, female KOs I think we've seen in the last little while. Now, where did Irene Aldana go after that? Well, we saw what happened when Holly Holm decided to put in all of her work into a beautiful training camp. And is that the scariest we've seen any female fighter not named Amanda Nunes or, you know, Shevchenko? Because, like, for me, I thought that was just, like, Holly Holm scared me that night. She looked incredible.
You talk about tactical dominance, and that's what that was, man. She played her game plan to a T on that one.
That was a perfect fight. That was incredibly a perfect fight, because you're dealing with a girl who loves to box. She's willing to stand there and take those shots. And Holly Holm's like, well, you know what? I'm probably better than you everywhere. Let me also show you what I can do on the ground. And just starts whipping her body all across the place. You know what I mean? Like some gymnastics show with a ribbon, and that was her ribbon. Like, it was insane. Like, that's what made me so impressed, right? And so now we're talking about the levels to this shit. So how does Vieira leave that fight? Well, at a distance striking with a really, really good boxer, I didn't look so good. You know, so going into the Yana Kunitskaya fight, it's like, well, Yana Kunitskaya is very much a kickboxing style, tries to use her footwork. But again, what I kind of don't like about her is the chinniness. Vieira's going to bring a lot of power to the game, right? A lot of power, whether it's in the going into the clinch or throwing her up against the fence. Like, she's just going to be very powerful. And I don't think that Yana Kunitskaya does very well with that, because we've seen her get dropped by several fighters, right? And to be honest, she's even lost by finish. So, I mean, Aspen Ladd, if you watch that fight, it looked like Aspen Ladd was just making bad decisions. Then she ends up scoring a takedown in the end of the second very quickly. And it seemed to just like, ding, things went on, and all of a sudden, boom, lands a shot within a minute of the third round and just finishes with ground and pound. So the thing that I don't like about Kunitskaya is I think that against very good fighters, she kind of looks a little one-dimensional. I think she's able to mix it up a little bit, but against these people that are a little bit stronger and can really mix it up, I think she's a fish out of water. If this fight goes to the ground specifically, I think that's a very scary situation for her. And even against the fence, you know, like I think even if she tries to go into the clinch, like Vieira's going to bring power. You know, that's the part that kind of scares me for both of them.
Similar to, I guess, maybe what we saw in 2018 against Cyborg, right? A lot of that power.
And where you kind of see Kunitskaya just not able to deal with that level of power. But these are really good strikers, right? Like that's the other thing. Like we saw what Aldana was able to do to Vieira. So for me, it's like I'm not putting so much bump into the striking of Vieira, but more so just her overall power. I think that's just an area of MMA where it could really dominate a fighter like Yana Kunitskaya, who's trying to play that classical striking, technical game, like bounce on her feet, kind of separate, move around, maybe get you in the clinch and land some knees to the body, maybe to the head if I can get my knees up there kind of thing. But Vieira's going to be able to do some damage there, like a sweep to the ground or any kind of takedown. Like I think it changes the fight momentum-wise in a big way, because she's going to be powerful. She's going to land powerful shots. She's going to look for powerful submissions, you know? That's going to be a different beast for her.
For sure. She's really going to, look to assert that dominance with that strength for sure. So, let's dive into the line here. I'm assuming you know who the favorite is here. So let's see if you can nail that number.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm going to go with Vieira again as a favorite. But again, getting knocked out the way she did against Aldana, these are the things that stop us from going very, very high. Because what do we know that drives the line? Undefeated records, really, really good strikers with proven, track records. I think in this case, you're going to see someone who's going to get the bump because it's on paper, but it can't be more than minus 200. So we're going to go with Vieira at minus 180.
How about Vieira at minus 275?
Yeah, and what's funny is I wonder if that's even been bet up. I don't know if you have the opening line, but I don't disagree. I just think that she's going to have such an advantage, like we said, from a power perspective. And there's no way Kunitskaya is taking this woman down, or like, I don't even think that it would be part of your game plan, because you probably aren't thinking like, that's a place where I know I could
fighting a losing battle there. Yeah. Absolutely. If you had to lean, would it kind of be like a Vieira by decision here?
To be honest, man, I think because of that power factor, like even in the third round, if Vieira has pretty good cardio, because like we said, man, that last fight where I feel like, against Ijara, like that was a good fight, man. I think that she had to work for that win. I really do. And so I truly believe that this might be like versus Eubanks and Kunitskaya. Maybe there's a chance that she pulls off a late finish, because
KO,
like even submission, right? Like that's the thing that I feel with Kunitskaya in this fight, is that it just so happens that the things that this woman can bring to the table might just be a little bit too much. And Kunitskaya has a chance to be the better striker here. Do you know what I mean? It's just the power factor in all facets. It's just a little scary. She's a powerful woman, but Irene Aldana proved that means nothing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as the full lines get released, we'll be taking a look at the over-unders and that kind of stuff. And if we have anything to lay for you guys, we'll be sure to let you know.
It's time.
I believe this is due to what is upcoming here. Why don't you stand up for us, Siraj? Why don't you give us a nice view of that beautiful man right there? What's on the back? Oh, there we go, man. Gonna have to do our best to, put our biases aside on this one because we got the main event here. The main event, which was supposed to happen a while ago, headline another card, but here we are now, a couple months later. We got Curtis Blaydes against the Black Beast, Derrick Lewis. One of the most entertaining guys ever to touch the sport, for sure. So, you know, and
like inside and outside, you know, like the guy is just pulling off the most amazing fights you've ever seen. Like that, if I wasn't already such a believer, like how are you pulling more people in with that Volkov win? Like it's just so funny to me. He's such a
funny.
monster.
I went and rewatched that one actually in prep of this, and man, dude, like some of the rabbits this guy pulls out of the hat is just so crazy, man.
I know.
And you know, he backs up all the shit talk. He's hilarious. That's our boy right there. So, you know, let's touch on just a few kind of arbitrary things here. Blaydes, 14-2 record. You know, having won 4 in a row, KO of JDS, win against Volkov. You know, recently one of his 2 losses came to Ngannou. True beast in this division. You know, should be getting a title shot soon enough. On the flip side, we got our boy Derrick Lewis here. Beast, 24-7 record. He's fought them all. We saw him live. Just take on Ngannou and somehow pull out a win there. Prior to that, he has losses against Cormier, JDS. You know, I believe he's beaten Ngannou, Volkov, and Tybura. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he's fought everybody. In the division, he's basically fought everybody, and it just comes down to like what Derrick Lewis we saw in there, and also what other fighter we saw in there. Like, let's be honest, Francis Ngannou had every chance in the world to also maybe chalk that one up. But, you know, Stipe shocked this man mentally and was like, oh shit, I am human. I do need to figure some things out. And so you're seeing that happen to him against Derrick Lewis, you know, thank God. But I don't want to see Derrick Lewis injured at all. But, you know, go back into like the current fight. Like he's actually already scheduled to fight Stipe, by the way, for the title for the second time in March. I think it's March 27th. So he's going to be already scheduled for that. But let's look at Curtis Blaydes. Curtis Blaydes actually has the chance to be the next in line and have the opportunity to fight the guy who beat him twice for the title. Do you know what I mean? That's a story in itself, but is it a sellable fight, right? That's the big thing you have to tell yourself, because do you believe, and this is a question, who do you think the UFC wants to win this fight?
That's an interesting question, man. I think it depends on how the fight plays out, but if it is going to not be a technical go the distance, you know, somewhat boring of a fight, I believe they want Blaydes to win.
So here's my thing. Personally speaking, Derrick Lewis is putting all the work he can into being an athlete and give it one last go. 100% biasly speaking, I hope he wins this fight. Blaydes is only 29. He hasn't even turned 30 yet. His time is coming. He'll have plenty of opportunity. He still needs to work on that, you know, footwork and those hands and everything that comes with fighting Francis Ngannou. How did Stipe beat him? Better boxing, better footwork, rolled with some punches. Like, it was almost like a humbling experience for all of us to see a guy like that, who people thought was just such a monster, basically getting compared to the Predator against Arnold Schwarzenegger. But I mean,
he is a monster, though. He is a monster.
100%. And you know what? He's gotten better now. The striking actually looks more technical, and the power is still there. That's the scary part for Stipe. Stipe obviously did not want to take this match, but it was the one he had to take. And, you know, I thought he handedly beat him, and that was just one of the best heavyweight fights you'll ever watch because of everything leading up to it. And, you know, you had the Cormier and Miocic saga that we were kind of personally a part of, which was phenomenal. Video of me crying at the top, like it just like peak, whatever you want to call it, whatever at the UFC event. But like we said, off to One and Oak we went. I really think that this is a tough fight, right? Like it's just, Blaydes is a great wrestler. I think that the Ngannou losses taught him to avoid things on the feet. So, I mean, I'm curious if you, from what you've seen from both guys, I mean, it's tough to side with Lewis, right? From a betting perspective. What do you think?
Obviously, from a technical perspective on who should win the fight, all odds point to Blaydes. But I feel like that's Derrick Lewis going into any of his fights. And then somehow he pulls out these miraculous knocks.
And that's where I think you answered your own question, right? I think the UFC definitely wants to you answered I answered my question, but I think that's you answered my question a bit better because you know what? I think the UFC wants that exciting fight. And I think that if you had to watch Ngannou beat Stipe in maybe a knockout, who knows, whatever way he tries to, if he beats him and he then has to face this man for the third time, think about the UFC from a promotional perspective. I have to now promote the top fighter probably from a pull perspective against a man that he already beat twice.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's a very tough call. I think it's almost better to assume, from a UFC perspective, if Stipe go off and wins that and Blaydes wins this fight, watching a Blaydes Stipe fight will be so wonderfully MMA technical that people will love it. And now whoever, Stipe might even retire after he fights Ngannou. I can see that happening for sure. But that still means that, a Blaydes title defense against Ngannou for the third fight is a little bit more, promotable than I would say the opposite.
Yeah, absolutely. So, this is going to be a great one. I do believe Lewis has a puncher's chance, as he always does. Do you remember the line from the original bout?
Actually, no, I do not. That one was a very long time ago. Wow.
It was. I was actually at your house when we were looking at it the first time. So that should tell you how long ago that was. So, let's see what your prediction is for this one. It's actually not that far off from the original one. So
I have to still give it to Blaydes because he's going to have the technology. I don't think Derrick Lewis goes into many of his fights at this point of his career when he's fighting the best in the UFC as the favorite. Everybody's looking at this guy who looks slow and all this, but the guy's head is in there and he's a dog, man. He's an absolute fighter. Like that's what he is. He generates power at any point in the fight and he's becoming a better athlete. So that's what scares me the most. But, Curtis Blaydes doesn't deserve to be a minus 300 favorite. He has the athletic chance, and we're not talking about a Francis Ngannou type power because there's more technique a little bit, I'd say, in the boxing there. Like we're talking about a man who's just almost street level boxing and can actually throw some pretty good combos and lands accurately. That's the thing I love about Lewis. So at the end of the day, you're banking on a lot more to happen for Lewis to win. So we're going to go with Curtis Blaydes at a minus 250 because I can play both sides. He deserves the over minus 200, but he is not a minus 300 favorite.
So last time when this fight was scheduled, the line opened at a minus 375. I very clearly remember this at your house and just being shocked. So it did open at a minus 375. By fight time, it had closed at minus 345. Okay. Now, obviously, this event was canceled then. If I look now, it's dropped even further to a minus 334. So it's still heavy. So it's still a very heavy favorite. But we see the trend, right? 375 opening. That last fight, it closed at 345. This time, they didn't even open that high. It started at minus 334.
You ain't got to ask me where my, if I have a pot for the betting, where my money's going for this fight. If we have a pot per fight, where I'm sprinkling. I would honestly say that, think about the fact that this being a 5-round fight. If Lewis is able to survive, which he survives very well, bro, be careful. My boy might just pull off another beauty and set himself up for I almost pulled the pies. I'm going to say swearing is a pies thing because he's going to hate that. But I'm going to...
No, do not make swearing a pies thing.
See, there you go. So I knew that was going to be a thing. He's already done it so many times, my word. Oof. But,
this guy.
I just, it's just hard for me not to look at that. I love Derrick Lewis in 5-round fights. What do you want me to say? You might see fat guy. I see dude who just continues to just survive. He literally survived with even Olenek, man. He was on the ground for a little bit of that fight. He knows what he's doing, man. And I think people underestimate how smart he is.
And I think he likes being underestimated. Of
course.
I think it's part of his
man. Yeah, he loves it, man. He loves being a dog. But This man is starting to truly show signs of improving as an athlete. How much further as a UFC fighter he's going to take it, we'll see, because I know that he's doing what he has to kind of invest all around. I would love to see, if you watch his interviews, I mean, he's a pretty talkative guy too. He's a pretty smart guy. So I would love to see this man kind of do, you know, if him and Cormier were doing like heavyweight stuff.
Oh,
like,
don't even get me excited there. I knew you were going to say it. What a dynamic duo that would be.
I think if these two had a show and they maybe did like a little spin-off with Ariel Helwani a little bit here and there, could you imagine those three just having a little, you know, shoot the shit type of show? I think it would be really, really fun. So that's where I kind of see Lewis's career overall. So if it doesn't happen, you know, in this fight, it's going to be interesting to see where his career goes, because at the end of the day, you fought almost everybody. You don't deserve to be a gatekeeper at this point, because I think you're enough of a draw where they would still want to give you a pretty good name, even if it's like one of the bigger name prospects. I still don't think that's a gatekeeper. That's a guy trying to get a title shot, which is like, I think gatekeeper really is for like if you're a guy like just outside the rankings, or a guy who's ranked like 14, 15, trying to prevent guys from getting in. Like, I think that's where I kind of classify them personally, because at some point, man, especially in heavyweights, when these guys are so old and they're still fighting, like, how many times like are you going to be able to fight the same people, right? And you're going to see it now. Like, we already have, you know, Cormier Miocic, like that was a big one. You even had Jones and Cormier, right? Like when you're that good and you're at those levels, like, unfortunately, there's not a lot of guys that are that big and that athletic.
Good, yeah.
Yeah, you're just going to end up fighting the same guys over and over.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, you know, safe to say we are pumped for this one. UFC Vegas 19 takes place next Saturday, headlined by our boy, the Black Beast, taking on Curtis Blaydes. We got a bunch of beauty heavyweight fights on that card, so I'm super pumped for it. You know, that wraps it up today. If you haven't already done so, smash that like button, hit that bell button, give us that subscribe, the follow. All our Instagram, Twitter is all there. Any questions, comments you guys have, just send them our way. Anything else, Siraj?
I mean, you know, just be ready. Like, we keep pumping this fight up, but be ready for a 5-round wrestling match where Curtis Blaydes isn't able to finish this man, and Derrick Lewis isn't able to get off his back after 3 rounds, and you're just watching a guy get taken down for 5 rounds. So just be ready for that as well.
Yeah. Nice little disclaimer there, my man. Always a pleasure, dude. Take care.
You too, my guy. Take care.